All right, Rich Fann, it's great to have you on the show. We'll get into why you can't be on camera. It's quite the story in a moment. But the teaser is we'd be looking at your foot or your feet if you were on camera. We'll explain that in a moment. But it's a great week to have you on here on the Dynamite Post Show. It's a rare treat because normally we're recording the flagship and even more often the VIP exclusive show, Everything with Rich and Wade for our PWTorch VIP members. But Dynamite tonight headlined with a Stardom match, and you are the resident Stardom passionate expert. So let's start there. We have Mariah May retaining the AEW Women's Championship against Mina Shirakawa. They went just over 10 minutes. Good match. Main event went into the overrun. Did a nice job building it, including a video package right before the match. They've been doing more of that lately. And then we had Thunder Rosa at ringside, adding a little element to that, an extra element to it, as she was holding up a sign saying, "You're not my champion," and then also just kind of yelling at her. But the big news, besides a title being defended successfully, was Toni Storm returned as Mariah May was celebrating, and she came out to her old music, her old look. Looked emotional. The crowd popped. Mariah May looked a little perplexed, and Thunder Rosa was kind of soaking it up too. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts, Rich, overall on what happened tonight in that main event. Did the match live up to your expectations? And what do you make of Thunder Rosa and Toni Storm?
Yeah, Thunder Rosa essentially was Wile E. Coyote, because she even switched to a WTF sign when you had the appearance of the Toni Storm, not Timeless Toni Storm or any of the variants. And I thought the match itself, with her in the background, it did a really good job of setting up the next thing and the next thing, similar to the men earlier in the evening, having a four-way kind of design to be set up. I thought the match, while it was short, the fact that it went over the overrun, leaned into this is the 60-minute time limit. I really even liked the fact that you had the after AEW went off the air, Wipeout said, "We're not going to enter our programming already in progress." And so I thought that was really cool that this was, again, this match is so important. We are going to preempt something else. It's like watching a live game. Like if you're watching the Vikings, they're not going to play the next television show until the conclusion of hopefully, you could have your occasional Heidi situation. But yeah, so I thought the match was really good. Clearly with 10 minutes, you're not going to get a chance to do a Stardom style 25 minute epic. But I thought the two women, good chemistry, obviously from their time together. Great story. And as you mentioned, I love the fact, and I even mentioned that on Blue Sky, I love the fact that they're adding those vignettes. We talk a lot about on the WWE side, removing irritants. This is adding context. And I think the more they can add context to some of the content people may have missed, or some things they might not have gotten because they aren't read into the world of Stardom, I think it's great for everyone.
And this was a loaded show. And so with the length of the match, I would have liked to have seen it go longer, because I just think that's kind of on over time on average, you want your world title matches to be longer than a Hulk Hogan MSG WWF title defense circa mid 80s, when everyone was complaining about how short his matches were. And you have a little bit of a baggage and stigma over how women are treated, how much time they're given. That was a big deal, pre Divas Revolution, Women's Revolution, where matches on TV were really short. So there's a little bit of baggage there. But this was a loaded show, with the Adam Cole Kyle O'Reilly match to determine who would face MJF for the Dynamite Diamond Ring. You had two Continental Classic matches, Claudio against Will Ospreay, highly anticipated first time one-on-one match with them. Ricochet and Brody King, another good match. And then Jon Moxley and Pac and against Jay White and Orange Cassidy. So that was a lot to fit into 2 hours with commercial breaks and, Chris Jericho's Minute from New York and other things. So, there's some room for being forgiven there. If this was not as much of a loaded show in terms of matches, I think they probably would have gotten 5-6 more minutes. And I don't think they would have feared the people tuning out. I want to get your talk about Tony. We'll talk about everything about this in a little more depth, but Mariah May as a centerpiece of AEW's women's division, is this the right person to go with to define the division? It's not a Paige coming back. It's not Sasha Banks. It's not people who are known more by their WWE names who are coming in. Even Toni Storm, is a WWE wrestler. Is Mariah May good at kind of giving AEW that female brand of their own? And is she good enough in the key ways? Match quality, personality, promos, presence, all of that. Rich.
I think she's very much a reflection of what I wanted to see in Okada and what I wanted to see in some of the imports they got from New Japan. Because, hey, Blake, as you look at what happened with Stardom's agreement with New Japan and then Stardom's agreement with AEW after management shakeups, Mariah was the first person that came over. And when Mariah came over, they've done an excellent job of making her an AEW wrestler that came from Stardom instead of look at this wrestler from Stardom that just happens to show up here every week. And you can see the difference. She is very much one of their, I guess at this point, third generation imports from another promotion that is now integrated, embedded into the program. And I think she is a great person to lead the charge for the women's side of things because her gimmick being the glamour, which is what she used in Stardom, It's a variant of it. It's similar to Jon Moxley now bringing the Death Rider gimmick from New Japan into AEW as part of his character and spreading it to the rest of his faction. Mariah, my buddy Shahid mentioned it this evening when we were talking, and I really liked it. She's like a Guy Ritchie version of one of the other archetypes you've seen in the past in WWE or AEW as far as a heel champion. So she's grittier, she's more violent, but she still has that allure, and she can still lean into her beauty and a lot of the aspects of her characters. It's very like almost like Rick Martellish in that she's so vain that sometimes it makes her oblivious to some of the pitfalls she sets up for herself. But then at the same time, she's so devious that her plans seem to always work. Notice in the match, she used her glamour driver, didn't work. She uses Storm Zero. Storm Zero is protected as a strong finish, puts her down. And so now the originator of the move pops up, and there's, hell to pay. There's, debts to be paid, et cetera, et cetera. So I think she's great. And unlike Paige, unlike Mercedes, unlike some of the other WWE imports, you have someone that is wholly yours now. It isn't even like folks think about Stardom anymore. Like you mentioned, they really just think of her as either the sidekick to Toni Storm that's now turned on her, or now the person that's turned on their new favorite person, Mina Shirakawa.
She debuted in Stardom late in 2022. Talk about what stood out to you about her in Stardom, and frankly, just give a little bit of background on Stardom for people who are hearing a lot about it on Dynamite tonight. It's been referenced on AEW TV in the past, but obviously not everybody who watches Dynamite is all that familiar with Stardom, other than the passing mentions on AEW TV and maybe a little bit of coming across it online. Talk a little bit about the context of Stardom, and then Mariah May's contributions. Was she a big standout star there? Was she just another player, and now she's really rising the occasion in AEW? And what stood out to you about her work in Stardom as she started to make more of a name for herself than she had before?
Sure. So Wonder Ring Stardom, if you want to get the full world, Wonder Ring Stardom was the name. Rossi Ogawa was one of the founders. He's since left and created Mighty Gold, which is another Japanese women's promotion. When she came to Stardom, it was very much just like with New Japan, for those of you unfamiliar. Anytime you have a non-native wrestler that's coming in, they'll, stick them in a faction. Stardom's very faction-based. That's the first thing I should say. And so she was in a faction, and she came in, and I thought she did a really good job when she joined of standing out, because one of the things you saw when she came in 22, she was accompanying Mina and Xia Brookside. And so they took on Cosmic Angels, and they were feuding at the time with Donna Del Mundo. Donna Del Mundo was the faction that was led by Julia, currently of WWE. And so you typically would have in Stardom these factions. You'd have a face faction, heel faction. DDM, heel, Cosmic Angels are all women that had been at some point seen as like glamour models, but they wanted to show that they had some steel behind the beauty. And so her in that group as the young lioness, so to speak, made a lot of sense. Her personality shone through in those matches. When she began to wrestle as a singles, her work was tight. Her professionalism showed. She was given nothing but high marks from folks that talked about her in the back. she rose to the level of, I would say, mid-card to upper mid-card. So she was high enough that they could trust her, but not high enough that when she left for AEW, you were losing a main eventer like when Julia left, or like when you've had injuries to some of their other folks, or when the Marigold split happened and you lost some of those folks that were really going to be counted on to be the next step for them. And so she was in a perfect spot. She had just enough training and just enough of the stardom background to have a strong wrestling spine. But then she also already had the natural charisma and ability to stand out during promos in Japanese or English to allow her to then transport over here to AEW and just really learn and kind of cultivate herself, similar to what you saw with a lot of women during the pandemic era, where they would show up on, like an Anna Jay. In fact, as a corollary to this, Anna Jay this year going into the 5-Star Grand Prix, which is the Stardom equivalent of the G1 tournament, allowed her in many ways. I would encourage people, if you want, go onto YouTube after this, search for anything with 5-Star Grand Prix and Anna Jay. You'll see a lot of her promos where she talked about the fact she got to wrestle 3, 4, 5 times in 15 days. The fact that she was physically challenging herself. And even though she wasn't winning, the fact that she was able to see she could wrestle was very encouraging for her. Because if you look at Anna Jay, I think she had maybe 8 matches before AEW hired her. And so when you compare her to Mariah's was probably at 7,500 matches before she got to AEW. And that difference allows her to kind of do what she's doing right now on television.
Yeah, I mean, she looks ready for prime time. She just walk into the ring tonight. She oozed top star vibes, and that's something that AEW has largely lacked in the women's division. Or it felt as if, it's somebody who's coming back after their best years or whatever. It's just I thought her walking out, if you're an AEW advocate of the brand, doesn't mean it at the exclusion of anything else, WWE or otherwise, but if you're an AEW advocate for them to kind of get their own identity, Mariah gives off that X factor that some of the women frankly haven't in AEW that they've gone with briefly over time. You can think of a handful of the people that they've kind of given little runs to on top. So, and I think people recognize that a year ago when she showed up in AEW, that this is somebody who's got a real chance. So we're going to delve into Toni Storm's return and how Thunder Rosa fits in, and the change in Toni Storm's look, reverting back to her old look and what that means, and the timing of them wrestling after we introduce ourselves. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, the editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter and the website PWTorch.com, celebrating 25 years since our launch, 25 years ago this month. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I'm also the host of various podcasts, including the Wade Keller Post Shows here live on YouTube on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown, and also the host of the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Podcast Flagship Edition, along with pay-per-view previews and occasional interviews on our Blue Logo show, the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Podcast. Yesterday, Todd Martin joined me on the Flagship Edition on the Blue Logo show. That is free. Search Wade Keller. Fun discussion with Todd covering a wide array of topics, including WWE looking to expand even more PLEs to 2-night events. And we talk Continental Classic and much more. Wide-ranging show. Check that out for free. If you haven't yet, search Wade Keller on your podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts on Android or iOS, and listen to that show and subscribe. You can also stream it right from PWTorch.com if you prefer. The links are there in the podcast section. But we are here on the post show, which, by the way, is also a podcast. Most of you listen to us afterwards in our on our podcast feed that we've been building up for 15 years now. We're approaching our 15th anniversary of doing free podcasts and live call-in shows. And so if you are not subscribing to the podcast, you can do so by searching Wade Keller and subscribing to the Red Logo Show. And if you're already subscribing to our podcast and you want to watch us live, you are invited to watch us live on YouTube. We start very quickly after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown. Again, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Just search PWTorch on your podcast app, and you can, on YouTube, set alerts so that you get alerted when we go live. All right. My co-host tonight, the voice you hear, is Rich Fann. He is a Pro Wrestling Torch columnist, PWTorch longtime contributor, and the star of Everything with Rich and Wade, a VIP exclusive podcast. He also for years has joined me on post shows, although less frequently lately since we started doing everything with Rich on a almost every week basis. But it's great to have him here. And as I said, great week to have him on because of his passion for Stardom. People who listen to everything with Rich and Wade on the VIP side of things know that I lean on Rich for insight and analysis on Stardom when they are in the news. So Rich, welcome to the co-host chair. Good to have you on.
Thanks, Wade. Good to be on and happy to partake. And as you said, apologies. Well, not apologies, just to kind of explain to folks the reason I currently, for those of you watching, have the juror number 6 picture up instead of you seeing me. As Wade mentioned, it isn't an OnlyFans thing. The reason you would see my feet is because I tore my Achilles on Thanksgiving and I just got surgery yesterday. And so I have to keep it elevated. And so the position I'm in order to record and then also keep it above my heart, because that's the best way for healing, would really be just an awkward video. And there are way too many people with screenshot capability, and I don't need that in my life.
I tried to talk you into risking your life to be on camera and lowering your boot, lowering your foot, and you just resisted, and I'm bitter. I was bitter, but you know what? I thought about it. Keeping you alive, I guess, is more important than seeing you live. And if it avoids your foot in the foreground, I guess that's probably better off too, because that'd be a little weird.
Yeah, ultimately, like Ray Phoenix, I would have to be putting up some nebulous tweets, and then that would lead to questions, and it's just not good.
Absolutely. All right. So we mentioned everything with Rich and Wade. That is part of our VIP selection of podcasts. If you're not a VIP member, you're missing out on a lot of cool content. If you like our brand, our tone, our vibe of how we cover wrestling, then going VIP is the only way to get the whole experience. That includes, we mentioned that the Fix with Todd Martin was simulcast as the flagship, the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Podcast flagship yesterday. That does not include our mailbag segment with Todd yesterday. So the mailbag is almost never offered for free, and it's a real highlight of VIP membership. And so you want to become a VIP member to get everything we do. And you can get a full rundown of everything that comes with a VIP membership by going to PWTorch.com/GoVIP. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Support us with a membership, and we will give you a lot in return for your money. If you want to support us through Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/PWTorchVIP. That's one of the many ways that you can become a VIP member and get VIP content. That includes ad-free versions of our shows in the first tier, and then you can get the top tier and get all the VIP shows. Full details at Patreon. Just search PWTorch VIP. And if you're part of the Spotify ecosystem, search PWTorch VIP in Spotify, and it'll bring you to the Patreon sign-up page, and you get a 7-day free trial. So we invite you to check that out. That includes our post-pay-per-view roundtables also, which we've been doing now for 20 years. And a VIP membership comes with our PWTorch VIP Podcast Vault shows, where we jump back 18 years to the day, to the week, and bring you post-pay-per-view roundtables, Real Deal with Pat McNeil, Wade Keller Hotlines with backstage news, Bruce Mitchell audio shows with in-depth coverage of the big news of the day and history, and much more. So we not only do current stuff, but we bring you really cool retro content also. All right, so let's continue our conversation here, and I want to encourage people to join us in that conversation by emailing us. WadeKellerPodcast@gmail.com is one way that you can be part of the show, and we'll be getting to emails soon here from listeners who have sent in emails. WadeKellerPodcast@gmail.com. Another way you can join us is in the chat room, and we're going to be reading some chats about Tony Storm and Mariah May in a moment here. If you're watching us live on YouTube, you can partake in the chat. I keep an eye on that. If you really want to draw attention to yourself and virtually guarantee that you are going to be included in the show, you can do a super chat, as is done on a lot of YouTube shows. And finally, you could be a video caller on the show. To be a video caller, you have to be a VIP member or Patreon supporter. On Patreon, on our page, we put up a link to be a video caller during the TV shows, Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown, so you can find it there. And if you're a VIP member, the link is at the top and bottom of my TV reports at pwtorchvip.com. So, Rich, getting back to Tony Storm, I want to ask you, first of all, what do you think about the decision for her to go back to her original look, the rock star look, I guess, as opposed to the gimmick that she had been doing that was somewhat polarizing and divisive? I enjoyed it. Do you think Do you think it ran its course? Do you think there was more to do with it? Do you think she might go back and forth? Were you surprised that she showed up with her old music and her pretty much her prior look?
I'm of two minds because ultimately, after the betrayal and the bloody way she was written off TV, the timeless Tony Storm character, as Blake mentioned, kind of had to die. And so her coming back as Tony Storm allows her to take this seriously. And then also from her emotional reaction, I think this was also surprising to her that people were ready to accept her as Tony Storm and not all of the machinations of timeless Tony Storm. So I think this is very helpful for her as she makes that evolution. Just like with any other character in any television series or any other wrestling promotion, once we've discussed this before with other folks, once you make that move to being more serious, you may have to scuttle off some of the things that you liked and take the risk of sticking to being serious, as opposed to, when we get to the match with Ricochet, I thought they made a very dangerous choice with him and going up against Brody King, because you had a sequence at the end of that match where folks were booing him until he pinned him and then they cheered. And that made very little sense to me in terms of, like, did you want him to win? Because you seemed to be mad that he was trying to win, but then once he won, you were happy. I think with Tony, it's very clear. She's back. She's excited. She didn't seem to have the mannerisms of the old Tony Storm, where she would come out and she'd be like, do the little poof, the puff of air in front of her hair, and then kind of like, I'm walking down like a rock princess. No, she seemed like she was ready for revenge and just soaked in the adulation, and we kind of left it there. So I think it's going to be good for her in the long term.
So the chat room is speculating on when their match takes place. They have their Australia show coming up, Grand Slam Australia. And SF Niners Fan 23 says, hopefully they build it up to Grand Slam Australia, not a random Dynamite. And then Standard Deviation says the Australia pay-per-view in February is in Tony's hometown, and Tony is at the forefront of advertising for the show. So I do expect them to main event. Rich, your thoughts on the timing? Is it stretching it out to wait till February, or is that about right to build up to it? We have Thunder Rosa in the mix. Perhaps a Mina Shirakawa rematch, someone else gets involved. But yeah, what do you think of the timing of actually seeing this?
I think between everything that's going on right now, you have some time, because Thunder Rosa, that's going to carry you through most of December into January. Then by the time you get to January, maybe it is something where perhaps Tony wins it at one of their inaugural events that are going to be on Max, like Fight for the Fallen. I believe that's what it was, right? That's going to be on Max.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a good thing. And then her defense in Australia would be a really good way to draw tickets or have the rematch set there. Or if you wanted to do a multi-person match, I think that could work as well, because if it was a three-way between timeless Tony Storm, Tony Storm, Mina Shirakawa, and the Glamour, Mariah May, you then have a mirror image of the match they had a year, I guess, ago, where all three of them were at each other's throats, and that led to the peace offering between the two.
Just as far as the main event goes, we talked about it earlier, Rich. Derek Hubbard says the main event segment worked. The match had good intensity. Nice to see Tony Storm back in her original form. Thunder Rosa feels like an unneeded add-on. I guess I'd just say let's wait and see. It may be necessary to bridge them to when they want the match to happen. I don't think we need her in a situation where it's a three-way. I mean, I think Tony Storm and Mariah May works. Rich, what do you think?
I think that makes sense. And for me, I see where he's coming from, because that role of playing Wile E. Coyote, or insert favorite Looney Tune character here with the signs, it is something we've seen before with like an Orange Cassidy, a Jericho, a Tony Storm. Who else did it? I feel like I'm missing someone. Maybe Hook. It can be a little over the top. I think doing it this time, that's fine. Don't do it again. Let's not make a habit out of it. And I think they'll be fine.
With Mariah May, I think that this is a chance to get moving. I think we feel that way about MJF. Like, I'm tired of him talking about Adam Cole and all that stuff. I think everybody's ready for both Adam Cole and MJF to just go different directions and be in a different program. That's happened before in wrestling. People kind of, sometimes we're in a holding pattern until the timing is right. And then by the time you get to it, people are ready to move on. Heck, even CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, some people were feeling that way. Things a little bit out of WWE's control, but part of it was just booking to the calendar. So Derek Hubbard brings up Mariah May is the right woman for certain. With that said, they certainly did not capitalize on her big title victory over Toni Storm. It feels like she's been in a holding pattern for 5 months. She lost a lot of momentum since August. Hopefully she did not cool off to the point that she cannot be heated back up. I feel it'll take more than a microwave moment to get her heat back. Rich, do you think we are on the verge now of seeing Mariah May become a significant, consistent, central character in AEW stories? And does having 2 women's titles and having a presence of Mercedes Moné, the former Sasha Banks, that's a big star power presence with a big legacy history with wrestling fans. Does that get away in the way a little bit, or does it put them on separate courses where at some point, both heels, but at some point they can have kind of what feels like a big time match in AEW because they do stay apart for a while?
I think this is a better version of the situation they had a few years ago with Jade, where you had someone that had the TBS title and they were off on their own universe and they were having matches, and then you had the women's world champion and no one ever talked about each other's existence. I think for now, this is more intentional, and this allows for, as you said, Mariah can move into the ecosystem completely. She isn't just the TBS women's champion. She's not just the women's champion. She is one of the top women stars in the company, belt or no belt. And I think that's helpful for her, especially given her age profile and the fact that she has so much she can give the business as it stands. In the case of her and Mercedes down the road, I absolutely would love to see that match. And given the fact that she is in Mercedes in the past has wrestled Stardom and has the ability to wrestle multiple styles, I don't foresee that being an issue. And so it's just a matter of what's going to be that next step for them. How do they make the two meet? What is it like if there was a Queen's Quest or something like that, something where there was a cup situation, almost like the Owen, where they can encounter each other for the first time, where it's literally set up for that stake to occur without it being a storyline, and you can kind of measure yourself against each other. I think I guess that would have been Battle for the Belts, huh? That could have been one of those Battle for the Belts situations, but that ship has sailed. You're muted, Wade.
Yep, thank you. We'll get to a couple more things about this, the women's main event match and the fallout from it, and then we'll get to Rude Dog, our video caller in the waiting room. And then, like I said, we'll get to more chat room and more email comments and cover a lot more topics here. First up, Darrell Freeman says, since Mariah won the title, that division has been shown as weak with no real direction. Also, less interesting with not much time on TV, even though they weren't getting much before. And we kind of covered that. This could be the time that they lean into Mariah more. Zach Barber said, I wonder how much of that is because of them having to wait for Mina on top of the fact that people don't expect her to lose until she fights Toni in Australia. And that's why things just seem aligned now heading into, as we close out the year and heading into the new year for maybe things to pick up. And I hope Mariah just a weekly, I would like to see AEW give a try to just spending 4 to 6 months of having Mariah May be one of the, top 6 people or top 8 people you think about when you think of, I'm going to watch AEW tonight or this week on Wednesday or Saturday. And one of the reasons is Mariah, that she becomes part of the top tier ensemble who they really dedicate creative effort to give content for her to be part of that feels like it's moving at a pace where every week you got to watch to see what happens next with her. Rock City said people didn't expect Toni to lose until the Mariah feud, and her reign was still good. SF Niners fan said, well, they go with Thunder Rosa versus Toni Storm first to help the build up. And yeah, I mean, Rich, we could see that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way. That's going to be, it's a detour before you get to the highway that's going to lead to them and their blood feud. Yep.
Brian Bayless, by the way, said, I thought the Thunder Rosa stuff was a miss tonight. Where are you on Thunder Rosa, Rich, in terms of there's so many wrestlers, it's part of AEW's, DNA, I'd say fortunately or unfortunately, but I think it's pretty much unfortunately. There's so many start and stop aspects to wrestlers, where they'll be on TV, you'll get into them, and then those kind of disappear. And there's a different reason for all of them. Some of them disappear forever. And others, go away and you don't know if they're ever coming back. I mean, how many times did Rusev show up and disappear? Ricky Starks, it's just that stuff happens. But sometimes it's just they're in ROH or they're relegated to Collision and Rampage and they never get talked about on Dynamite. Thunder Rosa obviously had injuries and there were some politics and stuff. Where are you on her?
Oh, I like her. I liked her from her time in NWA. And when they brought her in, I thought it was a bit of a coup to have her. Obviously, like you said, the political stuff, the injury stuff, being on Busted Open when you had folks like Britt Baker saying, okay, if you're so hurt, how come you can do all these like stunts and stuff on Busted Open and do these indie shows in Texas? And that didn't help anyone because, again, just like with sports, you want to keep a lot of in-house stuff in-house. You don't really want to have that like public domain. And I really feel like if you're going to have Thunder Rosa on the roster, just like my eternal quest to get Athena back on AEW television, you have these excellent wrestlers. Put them on television. If I can see Matt Cardona and he's advertising a Ring of Honor match through Collision and Rampage and Dynamite, I should be able to see one of the linchpins of the strongest women division you have and the basically progenitor of great minion wrestlers who are also standing out that are young, quality people that you really need to see on television. I want Mariah May, I want Mina Shirakawa, and I want Toni Storm to have the ability to wrestle someone like a Thunder Rosa, wrestle whomever you want to bring else you want to bring over from Stardom. I know they ran into the issue with Stephanie Vaquer, but show that this is a global wrestling promotion for the women as much as we see for the men. And I think that'll allow folks to get pulled in. The fact this was the main event, short or not, very encouraging to me. The fact that it was a main event where it wasn't thrown together, and this was something that you clearly saw they invested in, was even more important for me to see it. And so even if the sign thing didn't hit it with everyone, Thunder Rosa being adjacent to it, I think is a renewed faith, or at least an olive branch, in my opinion, to what they think she can do as well.
All right, very good. Want to remind people, Wade Keller podcast at gmail.com. If you want to email us, if you're a VIP member or Patreon supporter and you're watching us live, you can join us as a video caller, and we'll keep an eye on the chat room. Let's go to Rude Dog and bring him into the show and see what he wants to talk about. Perhaps follow up on the women's topic or many of the other things that happened on this episode of Dynamite. Rude Dog, welcome. Good to see you.
Hello. Great to talk to you, Wade. Great to talk to you, Rich. Rich, I'm sorry to hear about your injury. That's a brutal one, and I hope you get better soon. And
thank you.
I think it's whenever you talk Japanese wrestling, even though I follow Japanese wrestling, I always learn something when you talk about it. So keep it up, my man. So anyways,
thank you. And it's for me, honestly, Rude Dog, I pick it all up. Like one of my good friends, Karen Peterson, she actually speaks Japanese, and she is really my cipher for a lot of stuff, because even the color schemes, like if you want to really, like, I know I do the deep dive with Will Cooling. If you want to do a deep dive into Stardom or Japanese women's wrestling, she'll tell you the reason behind the outfits they're wearing, what inspired it. Like, for instance, Cosmic Angels with Mina Shirakawa. Mina was a model before she became a wrestler, and so she did a lot of let's say like tasteful photo shoots, but they were like borderline. And so a lot of times when she got into pro wrestling, they wanted to know, was she about this to wrestle, or were you about this kind of like in the old days of the Divas? Are you just doing this to get into the next like version of Playboy or something like that? And she's proven clearly from what you see on television, she's here to wrestle, but she also happens to know how to look magnificent while doing it.
Real quick, Kelly Wells and I were at NXT Deadline Saturday night at the really greatly gorgeously refurbished Minneapolis Armory, former home of the Minneapolis Lakers, when we used to win NBA titles here in the state decades and decades ago. And he told me he is studying Japanese, Rich. So you might have a new friend you can talk who will be able to speak some Japanese with you about Japanese wrestling. I was impressed. He's been studying it for quite a while now, and I didn't get a chance to hear too much of his Japanese, but I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so Rude Dog, back to you.
All right, so Jay White How do you think he's doing as a babyface? I mean, when he was in New Japan, I thought he was one of the best heels in the industry. And then he came into AEW and he was just kind of mediocre. And now he's a babyface and he just seems like another guy. What do you think's how he's doing right now?
So I wrote about this in my VIP exclusive Dynamite coverage last week, because last week I wasn't able to cover Dynamite live. By the way, thanks to Greg Parks for hosting in my absence last week. But I did watch Dynamite. I did do a report. I did make it VIP exclusive because Greg got the live report up. And actually, we'll have a Keller hotline going up to reviewing the show start to finish because I didn't want to miss a week. And in that Keller hotline and in my TV report, I commented on Jay White. And so it's fresh on my mind because I was kind of processing that also, Rude Dog. And my issue with Jay White is, what would an ardent AEW viewer say about Jay White to a new AEW viewer if they wanted to know who he was or what he was doing? This could be somebody who knew him from New Japan. It could be somebody who didn't watch him at all before. And all he did is drift into being a babyface. And, you know, I mean, obviously he's a good wrestler, but he's sort of generically a good wrestler. He's got New Japan pedigree. He cuts charismatic, distinct promos. I think when people watch him, they're like, oh, I'm curious about this guy. I'm interested in this guy. I think he captures your attention right away. But what defines him? What is, and I'm not talking about cartoonishly, you know, his whole personality needs to be summarized in 3 words, but you ought to be able to come up with, you know, a pretty pithy statement that just sort of is the starting point of who he is and what he stands for and why he's interesting and why you would be rooting for or against him. And your question, Rudog, indicates that you're in the same place as I am, which is AEW just seems like, well, it's Jay White. And now he's fighting for good. Who is Jay White? Well, he led the Bullet Club, likes hanging out with Juice, kind of goofs, likes being around goofs, cool accent. I mean, it's like there's nothing to him. There's not a mission statement. There's nothing that I think is really clear. Rich, what do you think about Jay White as a potential star in AEW? How do you grade how they push him so far? And do you think AEW just isn't putting enough effort and time into coming up with something about him that people can kind of latch onto and go, okay, that's who he is and what he stands for?
I think Jay is in a Mr. In Between stage right now. There should have been more of a hard turn that made him a babyface. Instead, it was just kind of like, and the only thing we didn't talk about was the Jay White standee when they had the switchblade sign they bring to the ring when he was either injured or out of town, things like that.
Yep.
He really just needed to be a little bit more than what he is now. And as a result, you have this confusion because you don't necessarily get a chance to see who the Jay White of New Japan was to who he is now. And not Neon 1984 from Reddit just mentioned it. As someone who never saw Jay White before AEW, I think he should be Juice Robinson second and not the other way around. He suffers from that first group of folks they brought in that you didn't really give a background to. You just said, the ardent fans are going to know, the Bellwether fans are going to tell you, follow them. Mm-hmm. I think today was an excellent example of how you sell people on who you have and where they came from, as opposed to expecting them to know it just naturally. I think there's some cases where it's okay to do your Googles. With Jay White, you should be able to see on your television why I'm rooting for that man. And right now you don't.
And even if you even if you Google his background, there should be something about him in AEW that goes beyond that. You know, like Sadler version 3 says, Jay White debuting with a Bullet Club affiliation gimmick after being kicked out of the group in New Japan made no sense to me. He should have completely shed every Bullet Club gimmick. And so, you know, we have sort of this derivative like the NWO back in the day of Bullet Club, and it doesn't make linear canon sense. And there, you know, again, you know, we say on everything, Rich, with you, no assume knowledge. You know, I like to have someone be able to listen to everything and not feel like they need to be on social media or reading stories to keep up on what we're analyzing. That's how I feel about AEW. You know, like, you know, again, it felt like Tony Khan didn't really believe in him, honestly, out of the gate. He brought him in, but there wasn't an excitement about him, and he got lost in the mix a little bit. I don't think it's too late. But Rich, you can finish your thought, and then I want to get thoughts from Rudog on what he thinks of what we said and where if there's something he thinks they should be latching on to as sort of the one of the defining traits of Jay White. But Rich, go ahead and finish your thoughts first if you got any.
Sure. And if I could indulge you, Wade, I would like to give a visual aid for those of you watching on YouTube, because I actually reached into this very subject before my surgery. But for those of you watching on screen, let me make sure I did this correct. And I think you as a person can present it, Wade, because I don't have permission to do that part. So this was what I wrote before I went in to operate, because I was using my notes app on my Google. And Jay White should sausage contact. And I was trying to say Jay White should reintroduce himself, I think. And that's what came out as I was typing before I, went into the land of anesthesia. And the title G1 Max and Pokemon, no clue. I don't know why Julia and Paul Dano did a promo with CM Punk. I was gone. But that first one actually, for once was on, and then finished with leg joke. I don't, nope, I got nothing. But thank you for indulging me on that one. I think Jay White and Not Neon also nails it, if you could throw that up there. He runs into so many roadblocks in AEW that I didn't anticipate, because they went into Bullet Club and they leaned into it so hard, and then they got booped on the nose and they had to change it to the Bang Bang Gang. And he's a muscular dude, but when you see him in AEW, he looks so small. And there's so many things working against him, because you don't know his personality. You don't know his gimmick. His whole deal in New Japan was, I'm the guy that can counter anything. And that can't be a gimmick in America. In New Japan, it made sense, because that was a very cool thing. And he was in Bullet Club and we'd let it go because he was a non-native wrestler. But here, they've got to rebuild him. It's got to be akin to what he didn't need to do in NXT, but he did anyway, when Kenta came to NXT and called himself a Deo Tommy and really wanted to go from brick by brick up. He didn't need to do that. Jay does. And I think Jay needs to do it quick, because, as mentioned, he seems to be lost behind Juice, because Juice already wrestled in the United States and he did okay, but he knows how to do it. And I think the sooner they fix that, the sooner they can help fix Jay. Zach, I think he's smaller compared to. But
Rich, don't bring up chats until I do, just because it's confusing for people listening on the podcast side. And I've got them all started, and we'll get to them. I want to jump in before I lose my train of thought too. With Jay White too, I think you're talking about Juice, and I want Jay to react more to what's going on. Like Jay sort of just stands there, and there's this stuff going on around him, and then he cuts a really good promo, but there's like, it was just kind of, as you were talking about Juice and kind of in the comments, him stealing the show, we're seeing like he should be the lead guy. Part of it is I want to know more of what Jay White thinks of what's going on around him. He just sort of, he's got this really good promo and charisma, and then you pull the string, you let go, and he cuts this promo, and it's really good. But I don't ever get a sense, once he gets through the rhythm of the way that he cuts his promo with that accent and everything, and it's cool, but I don't really feel like I actually know what he's thinking or feeling. I just get a sense of, oh, he had something to say and he said it in a way that sounds way cooler than almost everybody else on this roster. But it doesn't seem like a human being that I relate to. And I think that's the next phase I'm looking for, Rich, from him. Well, let me throw it to Doug. What do you think about what we've been saying?
Well, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, what really stood out to me in New Japan was after his matches, when they would go, backstage, and he would cut these vicious promos, and he knew exactly what he was saying. Like he was just a cutthroat heel, and like he would, cheat any way he could to win and laugh in your face about it. And he's had decent promos in AEW, but you knew exactly what his character was in New Japan. Here in AEW, not so much.
And as Rich has been noticing and pointing out, there's a lot of comments in the chat room about Jay. Not Neon 1984 from Reddit says, as someone who never saw Jay White before AEW, I think he should be Juice Robinson second, not the other way around. So we're kind of covering that already. Standard Deviation said, I really like Jay White and view him as a future world champion, and I haven't seen him before AEW either, but that's just based purely on the quality of his work. And then Darrell Freeman says, they have handled Jay White wrong in every way. When he was a heel, they hurt him, by how they let MJF beat him. And that was a bad moment. And from what I heard, Jay White was not happy about that. They was sort of the fill-in guy when things went wrong, and he wasn't a priority. And I think there's some heat there. And so they let MJF beat him when MJF had the bad hip, and then you turn him face with no backdrop nor reason. And so I do think that AEW has let him down. Darrell adds, I do wonder if Jay White feels like he made the wrong choice by coming to AEW and not waiting the few months to then sign with WWE. I will say I checked in WWE and kind of asked around what the feeling was on him, and because he was a topic of conversation. The feeling was that management, Paul Levesque, whoever, saw him as a guy who would get a push, but they didn't covet him as a top guy, and he wasn't going to get top guy money. I think ultimately Jay probably got a sense that he had a better chance to really, really shine in AEW. I'm not saying that turned out to be right, but he might have gotten the vibes in WWE because, as some people point out, he's got a lot. He's not a big guy. Like, he's kind of Adam Cole size, which worked against Adam Cole in WWE once he left NXT. Not Neon 1984 says Jay White's lack of size is definitely noticeable, and I think it hurts him in the same way it does Jack Perry. Now, I think in AEW, as Zach Barber says, Jay White is jacked. I don't know if jack's quite the word. Who's Aleister Black, Malachi Black's sidekick?
Buddy Matthews.
Buddy Matthews. Buddy Matthews. That guy's jacked. Needlessly, excessively jacked. Counterproductively jacked. Jay White's not jacked, Zach. Not in a pro wrestling way, as someone pointed out, in a swimmer's build way. But King of Strong Style says, I love Jay White in New Japan. I saw him come up, but he's lost in AEW. But Sadler version 3, it comes down to this as a babyface turn. And then I'll throw back to you, Rude Dog. Jay White as a face isn't working for me. He doesn't come across as a likable character. And so, and Sadler adds, by the way, I don't see Jay White's size as an issue, especially in AEW. I don't think it's a huge issue, but I think it's an issue in the sense that you got to do other things to make people care about him, because just, the eyeball test isn't, this guy is intimidating. Brody King he doesn't have to do much else. He doesn't even need the tattoos to be physically intimidating. But Jay White fits in sidewise. So the likability is a factor, and that's why it gets down to what I said a few minutes ago, Rude Dog. When Jay White cuts a promo, it feels like he's thought about what he's going to say, and he says it, and he says it in a charismatic, entertaining way. But I don't feel like I actually got any window into who he is as a person when he's done.
Yeah. I just think it's a mistake for him to be a babyface. I mean, this might be the only time he's ever been compared to this wrestler, but it's kind of like when WWE tries to make The Miz a babyface. It just doesn't work. Like, you could just tell the guy's so much better as a heel. Like, why mess with it?
Yeah. And Standard Deviation says, most of the criticism of Jay White is in comparison to his work in New Japan. I'm just excited to see how much better he can get. And that's the thing. There are things that carry over from New Japan, but it's not the be-all, end-all. Like, if you're Tony Khan, most people watching Dynamite and Collision haven't watched these wrestlers work in New Japan. They're not on YouTube doing research. And even if they were, I think people who know their background crave a whole new layer, seeing new layers of them being revealed, because now they're part of a weekly TV show that's English-based, where you should just, of course, get to know them better, and they should have a more granular storyline to tell. Rich, how do you grade AEW on that front? Going back to the beginning, where, okay, we know there's a core base who are selling out our buildings, buying tickets right away back in the day, and they know who these wrestlers are. But I always felt, it was back in the day when I'd say, they want to build to the second million, back when they had 1 million. The idea was work your way up to 2 million by bringing new fans in. And I think Jay White, the reason we're spending so much time talking about him, and when Rudrak brought him up, is I think he is emblematic of where AEW's shortcoming has been, which is, we signed this guy, he's got a great rep, and then they just sort of let up on the gas pedal, or they don't put creative effort into it, and they just put him on TV to have good matches and do his shtick. Rich, how do you grade them, and do you agree Jay White's sort of emblematic of that being an ongoing issue with AEW?
Yeah, I would give him overall from inception probably a C. Most recently, more of a B to B plus, because I think they've done a better job of introducing folks and kind of starting to establish who they are in AEW as opposed to who they were Jay White in particular is particularly emblematic because, if you recall, he showed up during the pandemic. Just his background, he was getting homesick and just really got tired of traveling and all the restrictions that they had in Japan. He relocated to the United States, and he showed up as this mysterious figure. And they really leaned into it. They gave him a lot of props. But then when he came back with Bullet Club Gold, they made him more jokey. They added juice. They added the guns. They added the standee. That's where I think they kind of took a turn. And then as you develop him and you sign him and he's your wrestler, I think the second he became an AEW wrestler is the second they lost their way, because they didn't have New Japan's own. It's like, now it's our guy. What do we want to do with him? And I don't think they ever figured it out for the first year. And then he gets hurt. Then he comes back. And they're figuring that out. And the MJF thing happens. And that really kind of cut his legs a little bit. I know we mentioned earlier the size. And for the folks who put that up and said size wasn't really a thing, given AEW's ecosystem, like you were putting there up on the screen, I would ask you to think back to when he wrestled in New Japan. If he's wrestling in Tomohiro Ishii, Ishii's 5'5", 5'6", generously. When you see him in AEW, think about how Ishii looks. He walks as a 5'6" man, but he looks like he's 50 feet tall. As he's gotten older, the more he shows up on AEW, the more he looks like a 5'6" guy who's really tired and his neck hurts and his back hurts and he's on Collision. You don't want Jay White to have that happen because he's so much younger. And I would love for him to have a moment to sit down with a Renee, with a Jim Ross, someone, Tony Schiavone, and kind of give his mission statement.
Yes.
Yep. And you have Derek there on the screen, 3 of the 9 world champions. But when you think of the world champions, and when you think, as Derek mentioned, Darby and Orange Cassidy, we know more about Orange Cassidy and Darby than we do about Jay. We just had a sit down with Darby where he punched himself in the face and talked about, I don't fear pain. I fear the cowardice of the young guys in the back that don't realize not standing up now means evil wins later, which is just, I was like, this is very erudite for Darby. Usually it's just like him in black and white blowing himself up. And so that's what I want out of Jay as well. Give us a chance to see who you are and why we need to cheer for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Talk to us, not at us. Like, talk with us. You know, like, I just think that's, I don't know, Epiphany's overstating it, but as I've been talking about him, that kind of struck me. Like, I really like his promos, but I feel like I've been talked at and not talked with or to. I think there's a difference there. And I think especially when you're a babyface, Rude Dog, you've got to have that connection with the audience. It was a big criticism of Roman Reigns. There wasn't that connection there in a traditional babyface way, the way Vince McMahon pushed top babyfaces. And with Jay, it's like, you know, this sort of, you know, just sort of meandering and floating, drifting is the word I used in my report, drifting into being a babyface without, and it doesn't have to be like some, you know, stereotypical overdone hard turn where you go from wearing black to wearing white, literally and figuratively. But there should be something that makes you go, had a certain mindset and approach. Something happened and now he's changed. And before I had a reason to root against him, even if I found him compelling and entertaining. And now I'm kind of on board with him and I want to support him on his journey. And it just doesn't seem to cross Tony Khan's mind that that's a thing that should be done. And I think Jay White's the type of person who should be speaking up backstage to make that happen. If that's if he realizes that's an issue. Rude Dog, back to you.
Well, you know, speaking of guys from New Japan that I thought were going to be can't miss, like top guys like Jay White and Okada. I'm not even going to get into that right now, but today was the first day that I felt like Will Ospreay was starting to get into that territory as well as just another guy. Like, I mean, he was received so well and had like just like wonderful reactions from the crowd. And maybe it was just kind of like a lame crowd tonight, but it felt to me like, oh geez, is he just gonna be another guy now too? What do you think?
I thought he tried a little harder with his ring gear and his entrance routine to like assert himself as an alpha centerpiece act. But then the bell rang and his job was just go out and have a first ever one-on-one match with Claudio and dazzle people with athleticism, which they did. It didn't jump out to me beyond that either way. Rude Dog, honestly, I'm curious for Rich's take. What do you think of what Rude Dog said, and what was your impression of his presentation today? And is he starting to feel like he's just merging into the speed of traffic and not a standout? Like I was kind of saying, I think Mariah May is on the verge of being, if they continue with what I think is some momentum with her.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a little bit more to get him into. He's merging into the speed of traffic and he's kind of meandering there. They need to kind of get him in the HOV lane and get him kind of ahead of things, so to speak. Like he really needs to kind of, and by that I mean, for those of you who don't know, don't assume HOV is high occupancy vehicles, 2 or more people in the car. He might need a manager. He might need someone that can provide that insight for you. And if it's not going to be him, for the love of God, don't let it be Don Callis. Don's got way too many people, and he's not a face anyway. But if there was a face manager that can kind of get to the heart of this dude's fighting spirit, this dude's desire to be great, this is why he's here, I think that would help so much for him. And I know we mentioned earlier, and people are harping on size. If you do me a favor, after you listen to Rude Dog, Wade, and I, go Google Punishment Martinez versus Jay White, because they wrestled at War of the Worlds. I think I was there for that one. And that was back when Jay was on excursion, and Punishment Martinez clearly wasn't Damian Priest yet. And you can get an idea of what I'm talking about in terms of the size differential, because for me, it's not like height or musculature. It's more or less just the guys he wrestled up to this point haven't necessarily reflected what you see in AEW. Like we saw Ricochet versus Brody King. Surprisingly enough, with the new signings, particularly like the Hurt Syndicate, AEW isn't a little guy, even though not little, I don't want to be derisive. Smaller wrestlers may have been at the top of the card and are at the top of the card, but they have a super heavyweight division now. It isn't just 1 or 2 guys. They have big dudes. And I think Jay can get into that role of being a tough guy, but have nothing to believe out of it when he's a babyface. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Sean Radican wrote a column when Jay White arrived in AEW and talked about how he was used to New Japan and how Tony Khan didn't seem to realize how he was used in New Japan in terms of his ring style and fighting from underneath, and that there had to be some sort of direction chosen for him in terms of what is his as a heel in an American setup in AEW. It's a different environment with different demands than in New Japan. And you have to pay attention to that if you want to turn someone into a draw and define them and have people understand who they are and react to them. And as a heel and now as a babyface, there should be a distinct defined change in him. Now it's interesting to see size-wise the difference between Punishment Martinez and Jay White. And I mean, size matters to some people, doesn't to others. But if it doesn't matter to you, it's good to keep in mind it does to others. Like, I mean, like if your money's on the line and you're running a company, you have to understand some people are going to look at somebody and size is going to matter to them. And just because it doesn't matter to you doesn't mean it is a zero factor in anything. That said, put up the good fight and go, I don't want that to be a reason to hold anybody back, but you want to have something that about them that you define that offsets that being something that you're even thinking about. And so therefore you want to make sure that there are other things about him that you think of first, so that the size just becomes a non-factor. And I think that is something that you can absolutely accomplish, but it has to be a deliberate plan, where like this is what you're going to think of when you think of him, not his size. And that absolutely can be accomplished. I mean, I just don't think that should be a big deal. But as far as Will Ospreay goes, Rude Dog, anything you want to follow up on what Rich and I had to say about that?
Not really, but I was at Ring of Honor shows when both Punishment Martinez and Jay White was on excursion, and saw them both in the ring, and it didn't bother me back then. And so I don't know. Right. I mean, I'm not everyone, but
and Rude Dog, mileage is going to vary, and I don't want it to feel like anyone listening or you yourself should see it as like, I love Jay White. He's one of my favorite wrestlers. And I want to apologize because I think I'll put it on the drugs. I misunderstood with Ospreay. I think Ospreay's fundamental difference is he's gained and lost weight over the last 3 years.
Yeah,
and
for
he's
sure.
found the size that fits him. Like I even noted on Blue Sky this evening, he looked great tonight. I mean, the Jonathan Taylor Thomas hair aside, but he has the size, he has the outfit, and I think he's figured out what his character is. But I feel like Tony fails some of these wrestlers by not allowing them to be featured in a way that allows you to continually see how awesome they are. And I think in Jay's case and in Will's case, the feuds are great, but I want to see more of like the restore the feeling. I love that mission statement. I came to AEW to restore the feeling. Then I come out and I prove I'm the best wrestler wrestling folks. And I want to see that with Jay because I think Will's a little bit further down the road. Go ahead, Rude Dog. Apologies.
Yeah, well, let me throw in before I go to Rude Dog. Zach Barber says Will Ospreay is the best wrestler in the world. I just don't see him merging into traffic. And those two things have nothing to do with each other. You can be the best wrestler in the world, but you can still be merged into traffic. And that, Zach, I think you're missing a very, very important point here, which is Zach is arguably the best wrestler in the world. Like, I mean, some people are going to say too high spot, the density of his high spots are too much, and he's not doing things in between moves that that are more efficient to take advantage of it, and it's a style that isn't sustainable. And I agree with some of that. So, I mean, best wrestler is very subjective. I enjoy the hell out of Will Ospreay's matches, even if sometimes style-wise I think you should slow down and milk moments and have a little bit of a different pace. And I think there's some very valid criticism about numbing an audience when you kick out of so many big spots because you just can't wait to have the, oh my God, he kicked out of that. Then it's like you pile on more and more. It's like putting frosting on cake 6 times. It's like just one layer is fine. But you can be great and exciting and athletic and jump off the page and still merge into traffic because AEW isn't doing their job by giving you something every week that people are talking about, where the fans are going, there's a challenge, there's an obstacle, there's a goal that he's pursuing, and he's going to talk about it this week or take a step forward or take a step back. And that takes time and effort. We're in a different era than 25 years ago when how wrestling was presented, or 35 years ago. And you've got to be, Tony Khan's got to be putting a lot of thought, or his team and the rest of themselves, what this week is going to change how people perceive me on the path that they know that I'm on. And I just don't see evidence of that in AEW's booking. I see people with Zach's mentality, which is he's a great wrestler. His matches on pay-per-view are going to be great. What more do you have to do? And it's like, you got to spend hours every week thinking and talking about what you're going to do with Will Ospreay. Every single week, there should be evidence of hours of thought and substantial conversation about what we're going to do this week to make sure every viewer of AEW thinks of Will Ospreay when they think about AEW, not some generic thought about how good the wrestling is and there's 18 things going on in AEW that I like. You've got to have stories that you're being told that conjure up dreams of their future, either hoping for or against them achieving it. Zach follows up, yes, but right now he's in the C2, which is all about in-ring wrestling. No, it's not. Zach, it's not all about good wrestling. Good wrestling is part of C2. It's part of every Dynamite and Collision and PLE. C2 is about wrestlers trying to win a tournament and what it means to them. They should be talking more about Brody King and what it means for him to do well but still come up short. Like, every wrestler should have a story that they're really hammering home who are in this tournament. And Will Ospreay, they need to talk about what it is beyond this idea of it's in-ring wrestling. I fundamentally severely disagree that it's as simple as the C2 is all about in-ring wrestling. C2 has good wrestling, and it is a setting that is an opportunity to tell stories and evoke emotion in fans. But you've got to do more than just do moves and keep score. And by the way, when you watch sports, you're thinking about more than good passes or whatever, and the score. You're thinking about individual players and where they are in their career and what heck. I don't love that sometimes I think about this, but it's like, can they afford to keep this player next year? Or are they going to be a free agent? Our team's going to come after them. I mean, there's so many things going on besides good in-ring wrestling, Zach. And I just think that's a limitation of thinking. And your comment is reflective of, I think, one of the limitations of AEW's growth that you share with Tony Khan. Rich, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. I would say, Zach, I get what you're saying, especially with C2, because when I think about the G1 or I think about other round robin tournaments, there's always this idea of, sure, there are stories that are created through the matches themselves, but there are always overarching stories that have gone into the tournament. Is the champion going to retain? Is this young hotshot going to acquit themselves well? Is this person who's older going to be able to survive to the end of the G1? I'd also say with Will Ospreay, going back, one of the matches or one of the things that really pulled me into Ospreay was Progress Wrestling. And Progress had 3 separate stories between Will Ospreay and a wrestler who was fired from AEW in Jimmy Havoc. Jimmy Havoc and Will Ospreay had delightful matches and feuds starting from chapters 13 to 20. Then they went to 41 to 46 and then 68 to 75. And the first feud was Will Ospreay was the young gun that stopped this evil champion that had a reign of terror over the company. And you saw the ascent and the fact that he was the only person, similar to right now what we see with Darby, brave enough to go up against this person who held a company hostage. The second, Will had gone to New Japan. He'd gone to other parts of Europe. He'd started to do indies in the United States. And he came back and he became a heel because he felt the fans turned their back, because at that point, Jimmy had become a face in his absence. And it's like, you guys care more about this guy, and I risk my life trying to stop him for you. And then the third feud was them now as established veterans themselves. And Jimmy basically saying, like, this is it for me. And Ospreay coming back to say, I want the guy I built this company off the back of fighting to come back out. We don't get that in AEW a lot with characters. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me over the course of 4 years, outside of like Hangman Page, anyone who's had that sort of dramatic growth? The only other person I can think of are the other pillars: Page, Darby, MJF to a measure, and then now we're starting to see it with Orange Cassidy. Everyone else needs that same treatment, because the Jimmy Havoc I'm talking about now, if for those of you who remember when AEW first opened, Jimmy was like most known for getting into a fight and getting knocked out by Excalibur at dinner. He couldn't port that stuff over here. Whereas Ospreay has clearly grown and developed and sent himself on a mission to prove he could do this in North America, and he's proven himself largely white. I think the argument we're trying to throw out is, if you're going to have these great matches, if you're going to have these opportunities for these guys to come over and impress in AEW television, there is a responsibility from the booker, matchmaker, promoter, owner to give them the best opportunity to sell a story to folks who don't know their story.
King of Strong Style says, Will is a man. I want to see him do more than just long matches. People, it goes to the Jay White thing. I want to get to know Will Ospreay. I want to hear from him almost every week. And I want it to feel like he's connecting emotionally, that there's, he's emotionally available on a weekly basis where we're sort of like, he's a friend of a lead babyface. Doesn't have to be. They can play different roles, but I think Ospreay should be in that category of kind of that friend who's texting you, calling you, sharing with you, kind of the ebb and flow of his emotions and how he's doing. And I want to ride that wave with Will Ospreay and whatever his goals are. And instead he's, makes a good high energy ring entrance and has a match that Zach Barber likes, a lot of people like, but there's more, there's just so much more that they can be doing on a weekly basis. But I think Tony sees that as, well, we did that 4 weeks ago and that'll displace a few high spots this week. So we can't have someone talk about something that they already talked about a month ago, or because we need to pack in the wrestling. And I'm like, people care more about the wrestling and the stars if we're hearing from them every week. Not everybody every week, but you got to pick your starters. My NBA analogy, you got to have your top 5 and then, maybe 3 people off the bench who get most of the time. Everything else, it helps fill up TV time, and you're grooming them to be top stars in the future, or they're playing a role, whatever. So it's just fundamentally, I think that's how AEW grows. And I wouldn't say all this stuff with confidence and certitude on a regular basis if AEW was growing, but they're not, so let's look for why. And I don't think it's a lack of radio commercials. Like, I really think it's fundamentally the product they're putting on the air is turning people, is causing people to stray away from it being appointment viewing. And they're competing with WWE right now. And if you're going to compete with WWE for people's time, there's things to learn from them that you should emulate. And then you have to be looking, as Tom Martin talks about all the time, what is it and this was in the fixed mailbag this week for VIP members. What are the 5 biggest mistakes Tony Khan has made running AEW? And, just it's fighting that identity as a promotion, and that might have to change or be augmented over time as circumstances and talent and your audience changes. But come on, he's just doing the same thing, and he's losing viewers and ticket sales. And I don't think they didn't brag about how many tickets they sold at All In Texas tonight. And they did very, very tight camera shots of a very small crowd showing up to see Bryan Danielson and Sting and all the current stars and Tony Khan. They didn't do any wide shots of the crowd that showed up for a reason, because it barely qualified as a crowd. It's embarrassing. And there's things they need to take inventory on and stop listening to people saying, but the matches are great, and understand that's baked in. That's a given, but it's not enough. Rich, anything you want to add to that? And then we'll go back to Redon.
Yeah, I think when you look at the way these things are presented, because I see this a lot on Blue Sky. I saw it when I was on Twitter. I don't want to yuck someone's yum in terms of, if you enjoy AEW as it stands, this isn't for you. This is so that other people can enjoy it too. I always think about, for instance, when I was on the East Coast cast with Travis and Cam, I would always try, if there was a new wrestler that was coming over to WWE from, say, Stardom or one of the other promotions, I would try to say, here are 3 matches you should watch that gives you the idea of the personality of a person before they get to WWE, and here's why I enjoy them. And so that would be my thing here. Let's get to the point where there are wrestlers, like, I want to be able to, it was really cool. I saw someone mention their kid, Amy Nemedy, over on Blue Sky, mentioned her daughter. I think it was a daughter, maybe I'll just say her child to be safe. Her child didn't watch Ricochet in WWE, saw Ricochet versus Commander, really liked Ricochet, wanted to watch it. Same thing when I brought my son to his first WWE event. He saw Rey Mysterio and was just like, whoa, this guy's awesome. And it's like, lo and behold, happy birthday, Ray. He's 50 years old. And he has this effect still on kids to this day. And so you want that to pull more people in, so we have more people enjoying the thing we're looking at. And when you look at the All In Texas, or moving the show from the stadium in Australia to a smaller venue because someone clearly gave them bad information that they could sell out a stadium in Australia. Like, Australia is a continent. I think there was a big
breaking news
misunderstanding. I know. But I feel like, especially because I have a friend, Richard Avian, Dickie Bird, he does my shirts when I do stuff over at Post. You forget, like, there's a comment when we talk about the electoral system in the United States, land doesn't vote. When you think about the landmass of Australia, it isn't like you can just go from one edge to the other and just go there to watch a show. You have to give people a reason to go to the other side of their continent to watch you wrestle. And you have not done that. And so examine that. And I think if you make $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever, is it going to be the same energy that you got when you went to Wembley? Or is it because you sold a bunch of seats at $1,500 a pop? What is that? And ultimately, if you're going to be the alternative to WWE, we see them do that all the time, plus sell those nosebleeds. You have to bring people in that are going to be fervent. Like, crowd was small tonight, really like the energy. That's what you need to do. Build that energy up. Go to the Hammerstein, and that's great. Do things like that. But also, if I can be frank and kind of do a Rich Fan deviation for a second. Sorry, standard deviation. I'm borrowing your gimmick. I really do not like the way things are going on with regard to AEW, GCW, and Hammerstein Ballroom. And the fact that you're run by a billionaire and you're moving into an indies territory, even if it's a building that everyone can use. You're taking the top star from their promotion and putting them on Dynamite. You're pulling your stars from their shows and no one's saying anything. That's very crappy. And it just, you're taking seats away from people who need it a lot more than you do, because you can eat the lost seats at the stadium. You can eat the bad ratings because you've got the war chest and the contract. These folks don't.
Regarding the ticket sales, Standard Deviation says, I'm concerned by All In's ticket sales. The previous 2 shows sold about 50% of their total tickets on day one. And, for Zach Barber, he's like, well, isn't $1 million plus in ticket sales impressive? I mean, historically speaking, yes, but ticket prices are very expensive. And Standard Deviation says it sounds like they sold around 5K. AEW's not breaking up the number for a reason. If they had sold 20,000, they'd be talking about it. And they then maybe could expect 40,000. But if they sold 5, 6, 7, 8,000, because the most expensive tickets tend to go first, you're going to be in a stadium with what? 12 to 20,000 people? 20 can look okay, but not red hot, and a lot of camera trickery. They got work to do. They got work to do, but they got time to go. And Tony Khan was talking to Fightful and just saying, it's the Tony Khan kind of hype machine. We kind of get used to it. Sometimes it can kind of feel like show me, don't tell me. But he was saying by the time people see what we're doing to promote this show, we got a long way to go, and they're going to be impressed, and we're going to sell a lot of tickets. So, we'll see. But they'd be bragging about the number of tickets they sold if they were really excited about that number. And what we're hearing is a dollar figure. And it sounds amazing, but it's not amazing. It's a little bit of a spin. Rudolph, back to you.
Well, Rich, I'm glad you brought up the whole GCW thing. I've been to a lot of GCW shows when I was in New Jersey, and was at the American Dream show where Ricky Starks came down the escalator and and then the next day I was at Bloodsport, and they announced the match that Ricky Starks gonna face Effie in LA, and then that got canceled because of some BS. And then Matt Cardona shows up. I'm glad they recapped Rampage, because I don't remember the last time I watched Rampage, or I wouldn't even have known Matt Cardona was even going to be a part of the Ring of Honor show, but with Jericho. But then Cardona today said, he belongs in AEW, which kind of made me scratch my head, because I think he really wants to get back to WWE with his partner Chelsea. But what do you think about Matt Cardona being a part of AEW Ring of Honor landscape? Is it just a one-off? Do you think he might actually, be there longer than just that match, or what do you think?
What do you think, Rich?
Well, first, I think it kind of sucks because you have all these wrestlers under contract at Ring of Honor, and Tony's said on numerous interviews, including several I've been on for pre-pay-per-views, that Ring of Honor and AEW are separate things, and a guy that's going to be on a Ring of Honor pay-per-view is now saying he's built for AEW. That makes no sense to me, especially when every time I ask about Athena being on AEW television, it's like, well, she's the Ring of Honor champion. We need people to watch on streaming for her. Again, that makes no sense. If she's the reason, she's the draw, why is Jericho the world champion? Why is anything else going on? Because I feel like it's patently, when it's convenient, the Ring of Honor titles can appear on AEW television, but they really just, I don't know why they don't want her on television. And so that frustrates me. And then you add on the idea of making Cardona the kind of linchpin for this, for the pay-per-view, when you have all these other wrestlers you have on contract you could be developing in the main eventers. And then on top of that, you also have the issue of, you pull Ricky Starks, you pull Willie Mack. They're not pulling Moxley or Marina Shafir from Bloodsport. They're not gonna, because Moxley's like, no, I'm going. And so either you're gonna say don't go, and he goes, because he's not ever missing up Bloodsport. And that's where my frustration lies. It's like, it's for thee and not for me when it comes to kind of the rules of who goes where and who doesn't go where.
Yeah. All right, Rudolph, back to you.
Yeah, that's all very confusing, and I honestly think it just comes down to the pettiness of Tony Khan and who's on his good side, who has the leverage and whatever. But
yeah, I mean, Moxley is Moxley, and Ricky Starks is Ricky Starks. I mean, they're it's just the reality. Moxley's gonna have more leverage than most, but it takes away the moral argument when you're selective.
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as Tony Khan like ghosts people, like like communication wise, he ghosts them off of television as well. Like Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks is fine. Why can't he wrestle? A GCW show? But I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it'd be nice if we had a sense that Tony Khan would just as legally, as much as he legally can, would just level with people more often, and like sometimes get into some uncomfortable details. Like, well, if every situation is kind of different and there's a reason for each of them, it'd be nice in some context to share that with the audience and not leave people wondering, because he does have a reputation now of just being, kind of passive aggressive. It's not Neon 1984 from Reddit says Tony Khan's quiet passive aggressiveness is something else. And from a reputation standpoint, I think it's hurting AEW's brand that Tony doesn't ever feel like he's leveling with people on issues that might be uncomfortable, but people wonder about, and they feel like Tony's only gonna focus on positive things and be a hype machine and a hype man, but not ever say something that's kind of reflecting on, yeah, this is a tough call. Here's why I did it. Here's some regrets or whatever. So it just, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
And just to kind of give a real quick thing, Wade, I wanted to make sure I was correct in this. The last time I did a post show with you, they were also in Kansas City, but it was Raw. And it was the Logan Paul with Patrick Mahomes, and how you were saying that they shouldn't present Patrick Mahomes as a heel with Logan Paul.
Yeah.
That was in April. They had 9,800 people in that same arena. And they had Patrick Mahomes in that same arena. There's no contract Patrick Mahomes or the Chiefs have with WWE to only show up there. How did you not get the biggest star or even Bobby Witt or someone from Kansas City to show up tonight and just say, hey, look at them. They're here to watch the wrestling. That is the thing they're missing. It isn't just for the folks in the club. It should be for everybody. And you grab some folks just so you can grab the attention for a nanosecond. And it's, I'm just flabbergasted by all of this.
Yeah. Rude Dog, good point, Rich. Rude Dog, anything else?
Yeah, well, they did. This is the first time I heard, but I'm not sure if they announced it before, but January 1st is going to be the first time that Dynamite's going to be on Max as well as TBS. Do you think that's going to be a difference maker? I mean, I don't think it can hurt, but do you think,
so
they'll find a new audience?
We're not likely to get the type of data that we get from Nielsen with the traditional cable stations. But your phrase, it can't hurt, is 100% right. I mean, it just can't hurt. You got another distribution method that's in a lot of homes that are not available. That for audience, there's an audience out there that does not have TBS and TNT access, but do have Max. I don't know how big that number is, but it's substantial enough to give AEW a larger audience that they're playing to sell tickets, sell pay-per-views, sell merchandise. And so, yeah, it's a net positive. It remains to be seen what that is. If suddenly we see let's say we subjectively don't think the product is better or worse, just kind of, our criticisms and our compliments are similar, but in 9 months they're drawing, 50% more people. They've reversed the downward trend and now it's growing. We'll think, hey, you know what? Looks like they reached some people on Max who they weren't reaching. Maybe they were lapsed fans who dropped cable. And now they have access to it again. The people who were watching 3-4 years ago, and now they're showing up and buying tickets again. So yeah, I mean, we might see some movement and go, do we attribute this to a certain wrestler or angle? And we're like, there's really nothing all that different. Well, maybe it's Max. So it's good, and more and more people are going to be dropping cable. I mean, wouldn't you rather pay 10, 15, $20 for a streaming service than $100 some for a few channels that you watch? Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have made that choice. And now between Netflix, Peacock, and HBO Max, you can get a lot of content, and then you just watch Pluto or the Roku live TV, and you get your just kind of regular linear channel options. And if you're not into news and you can live without certain sports channels, you don't need cable. And obviously everybody's moving that way. Even on tonight's Dynamite, they're advertising some animated series, and they're like, it debuts midnight on TBS, and then the next day on Max. I mean, almost same with Peacock. It's like debuting on NBC, but also on Peacock. So that's the way things are moving. And, AEW and WWE doing it kind of in sync right now with their weekly TV series is a strong indication of that. Doug, anything else you want to bring up?
So one last thing. This is totally off the topic, but I was in East Lansing today. It's a great record store called Flat, Black, and Circular. And I got this great selection of Italian disco records from the 80s, which
awesome.
They're all imported, and I've never seen any of them before. Unfortunately, this man passed away, and his family sold his whole collection of like 80s rare imported Italian disco like records. So I got a good chunk of them. But when I walked to the counter, the guy who rang me up, he's like, "Are you Rude Dog?" And I was
wow, that's awesome.
I was like, "What?" He's like, "I was gonna say something, but I didn't know until I heard your voice." And then I was like, "I listen to Wade Keller all the time, and you're on there." I believe the gentleman's name was Clint. He was super nice, but yeah. Cool. So I got recognized for being on your show.
Well, another reason for some people to be video callers, because then they can be recognized at their local vinyl store if they want to be.
How far is East Lansing from Dearborn? Because my son has a lot of hockey tournaments he'll go to in the Dearborn area, so it'd be nice to pop by. And if it's not,
it'd be
far away.
It'd be like an hour drive.
Oh, we already would have driven 4 or 5 to get there from Pittsburgh, so that I could do that standing on my head. Well, not literally right now, but
Hey, let's do Blue Sky plugs here. We have a question in the chat room, Doc. How can people follow you on Blue Sky?
I'm not on any social media.
Oh, well, Victor Bettina wants to know. So now, Victor, now you have your answer. You can't follow on social media. Rich Fann, how about you?
Oh, yeah, easy. At Rich Fann, all one word, .bluesky.social.
Yep. And you can follow us at PWTorch and at The Wade Keller. I mean, it's not at, but if you're on Blue Sky, you know what to do. Just search The Wade Keller and PWTorch, and the whole thing will pop up, and follow us on there. Cool. Rudog, great anecdote to end with.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate all your hard work, and take care tonight.
Yes, sounds good. All right, cool. If you are a Patreon supporter or a VIP member, you can find links to be a video caller. And speaking of which, the infamous / famous Zach Barber is about to join us here. Rich, say hi to Zach.
Hey, Zach. How are you?
Hey, Rich. I am good. How are you?
Outstanding.
I had to
jump in. Yeah, go ahead. No, it's fun. It's good to second time we get to talk to you and not just yell back and forth on the chat.
I had to come in and inject some positivity because there was all this dour talk. But I enjoyed the show tonight. To go back to the women for a second. First of all, I could not call in. It's probably me.
Okay.
There we go. First of all, I could not call in on a show where Tony Storm is returning. Obviously.
Yes.
Because I am, admit like the biggest Tony Storm fan like associated with the Torch, I think. So.
Yes.
But I also thought the Mercedes Anna Jay segment was good. Like you can't bury Mercedes tonight. That's like my favorite little mini Torch rivalry is you and Mercedes.
I have to bury. I got something I can bury about her, so you won't be disappointed, or you will be disappointed. You won't. Her outfit. I have said the best thing about Mercedes Moné, and it's not a dig, it's not a backhanded compliment, are her outfits. She sets the standard. I mean, like. Her look, her outfits, it's so major league, and so many people in AEW could make such a difference if they put the effort and frankly, the budget into it. I know she has a bigger budget than a lot of people in AEW when it comes to that because of her contract. Her outfit tonight was hideous. What was that, Zach?
Yeah, I actually agree. I'm not sure what that was. Yeah, unflattering is the exact word. It was not.
Oof.
It was, yeah.
The the first miss for her since she arrived. I mean, she's been great when it comes to that, and I give her credit for that. And not as a backhanded compliment. It's just that it really stands out. She's a professional when it comes to knowing how important. It's not important for everybody. Some people just care about moves and what happens in the ropes, but coming across as a star and projecting a very distinct image is important. And her image is, I'm a big star with a big budget, and I care how I look, and I put a lot of time into it. And tonight was like, whoa. Anyway, people who didn't see it, seek it out, and you'll be going, oh wow, Wade understated it. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, it was not fun. It was not a good.
Ramen Noodle.
But the promo was actually surprising.
Yeah, we'll get to the good part in a second. But Ramen Noodle goes, yes, she looks pregnant tonight. Duh, was that a rare L for her? Anyway, Zach, if your phone is vibrating, if you can move it to somewhere where it isn't, I don't know.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead then. Yeah, promo wise, we're still hearing it.
It was hold it. It was ringing, so I was trying to
just throw it, grab it and just throw it in the other room until we're done.
But he's using it right now, Wade.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's your camera.
Yeah, I can't throw it. I'm on the phone.
I was. You know what? Now I get that. Yeah. Well, someone's like, "Hey, Zach, you're on YouTube. Tell them to leave you alone." Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, it's
Whatever.
But yeah, the promo. Oh my gosh. I get it to quit.
So, well, okay. Well, you fumble with your phone for a second. If you can turn off vibrating, that'd be good. Your alerts. But Rich, talk about what you thought about Mercedes tonight. Her outfit, if you want, but especially the content of her promo.
Sure, I thought the promo was okay. I was more aligned with what happened with Anna Jay's response because again, that shows the confidence she's come back with post Stardom excursion, and it was fun because my wife came up to get me the ice pack I have to put behind my knee, and she really enjoyed the outfit discussion. I didn't know we were going to have this here because she was like, "Oh, I like her outfit." I was like, "Whose?" And she pointed to Anna Jay's. And I was like, "Oh, I thought you were going to say Mercedes because it's like she's usually very fashion forward." She's like, "Oh, no. I was like, "Well, what about Renee's?" And then we got into a discussion on how she doesn't like angled necks and suits in certain cuts on women and how that wouldn't be something she would wear. I was like, "Oh, you'd look cute in that." She's like, "Nope, not for me. Moving on." And I was like, "All right, lesson learned." But the way they set up the match, I thought it was probably a C from Mercedes and more of a B from Anna Jay. So I'm hoping I think the match is going to be really good, but I just feel like the setup is something that's pretty straightforward.
So the thing I liked about her promo, and we'll get Zach back in a minute to give his take, is I like Mercedes. It was kind of a Gunther type thing where it's like compliment and then just yank it away and stomp on it. And she's like, "Oh, you're still young. You're only 26." And it's like, "Oh, so she's touting her accomplishments at age 26. And she goes, "Well, by age 26, I was a 5-time women's champion." And, it was very heelish and smug to say that. But yeah, then she ended with, there's a price to pay when you mess with Mercedes Moné. And it's like, okay, you're just going into the pull string, leaning too hard on the catchphrase. I'm fine with catchphrases. They're important in wrestling, and I get why she does it, but there needs to be more content. I'm with you. I thought Anna was stronger, but I want to give some credit to Mercedes for setting up Anna Jay to be that effective in her rebuttal, because Mercedes was an effective heel there in her arrogance. Zach, back to you.
Yeah, sorry, it was my grandmother, but got it all resolved, so we're good.
Totally forgiven if it's your grandma.
Say, Grandma, get out of here. I'm on the torch.
The other thing I want to talk about was we brought up the Ricochet match a little bit earlier, and I was leaning toward put over Brody King, and he should be, because clearly Kyle Fletcher's got the blue side, the blue league locked down, and Ospreay's going to be, he's probably going to win the gold league, and it's about who's playing for that number 2 spot. And I would have went with Brody King, but clearly they've chosen Ricochet because at this point you do the math. There's really no way for Brody to get to that number 2 spot because he would be tied with Ricochet or Claudio, who I assume loses to Darby, and they've both beaten him. So either one of them would knock him out. I assume they're turning Ricochet heel because I mean he sure blatantly cheated.
What was that?
Yeah, and I don't know.
The Shirani laugh from Saturday Night Live.
Oh my God! I mean, like holding up an MVP card and then doing that laugh. He's turning heel. He better be.
The promo was questionable at best.
Yeah, he's awkward.
But I guess it's Brody King is kind of made in a way, like he is, and they kind of need to push Ricochet given that they just brought him in. Yeah, he's clearly turning heel, and with the suits, like I think he fits with the Hurt Syndicate.
Yeah,
like that would be a good vibe because Lord knows he needs MVP to talk for him.
And they chewed out Shelton last week on Dynamite after losing, and so I'm kind of thinking maybe Shelton's going to turn babyface and Ricochet takes a spot, and I think that's a better fit. I think fans are cheering Shelton. It's undercutting. Besides MVP bringing up sports heroes when he goes to local markets, which he ought to stop doing. He should know by now not to do that. The goal of a heel is to get booed and put over your baby faces, not get yourself over and get pops. But especially Shelton's getting cheered, and it's kind of undercutting his opponent. So just slot Shelton as a babyface and move Ricochet over to hang out with Lashley and MVP. I think that's a better fit. What do you think, Rich?
I like the why not both. I think if Shelton stays and Ricochet's there, they have a pretty good group. But to your point, if they are going to kick him out and say it's eat or be eaten sort of situation when you're in the Hurt Syndicate, that would make sense. The Shirani, seriously, if anyone looks at the SNL skit Shirani, whenever Rihanna walks into the room, he can't say anything, and it'll just be like, ha ha! It is literally that, and I really hope this isn't a situation like when Tony walked up to Brandy Rhodes and said, I really think you should be like the character the blacks in Curb Your Enthusiasm because you'd have fun with the role. That would not help. I hope this isn't it. He went up to Ricochet. He's like, you know what? Shirani, but you can wrestle. I hope that isn't what he did.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, Ricochet has all kinds of awkward personality-wise. He looks so cool. You know what I mean? Like, he looks like he'd be the coolest guy, but I mean, like, in WWE, there were, attempts to do things, but he just kind of came across bland, and they didn't really, I don't think, put a lot of time into it. I hope this all adds up to something where it all kind of falls into place, and it's like, oh, okay, he was on a journey to becoming something more distinctive than, a catchphrase and sort of a quiet confidence that says, watch me in the ring. That's where I do my talking. Is that how you feeling optimistic or not?
I mean, if they put him with the Hurt Syndicate, yeah. I don't know how well Shelton does. I think people like Shelton, but I don't know that he does well outside of the Hurt Syndicate. So I think it's kind of a catch-22 there. But I mean, I get why they're sort of pushing Ricochet because he's got the match with Zack Sabre Jr. at Wrestle Dynasty, so they don't, you can't sit him in there, losing basically and not doing well in the C2. And as far as that goes, I mean, it's sure looking like if it's Ricochet and Ospreay and then Fletcher and Okada, I assume it ends up being Fletcher and Ospreay in the finals. And then you get a weird heel versus heel match with Fletcher and Ricochet in the semifinals, I guess. But Fletcher and Ospreay in the finals would be good because I mean we saw them what they can do in the ring. So like, please run that back anytime you want. You're muted, Wade.
I thank you. I'd like AEW to go some enough depth with Fletcher and Ospreay that each kind of month or two that goes by, we're in a completely different place because of the ebb and flow of how they're reacting to each other, to wins and losses, what it means, breaking up a win, soaking up a loss, regrouping. Like this should be the defining men's feud in AEW. I mean, they can have two other defining feuds, but this should be, I think This should be the top one. I mean, the Fletcher's a guy who I think is worth trying going all the way with, like in the next 4 to 6 months, and then you can kind of reevaluate. But don't let up on the pedal. And Don Callis is a good spokesman. I think they put some. By the way, we talk about Mercedes' outfit. Someone's got to pick a better photo of Kyle Fletcher to put on social media. He looks so just awkward in minor league in that photo they used, and that is he is not awkward or minor league when he's not live on TV. So whoever picked that photo, go look on AEW social media at some of the stuff they put in the posters advertising his matches in the last week. It's awful. Quality control, people. But I want to, like, we're talking about this in the chat, Zach. You were engaging with people on this. I want to hear, like, a month ago they did this. I want a month ago to seem like ancient history. I want 4 weeks ago, that should feel like ancient history with all the things that we've heard and seen with Callis and Fletcher and Ospreay. They got to come up with stuff to keep us engaged. They can't let 3 weeks go by without some development that adds a new layer and some new thoughts and some progression based on how they're interacting. And, really Mercedes and Anna tonight's an example of doing that. Like, there's creative ways to go about that. There's sit-down interviews, there's stand-up interviews, there's interactions, there's guest color commentary, whatever. So, we saw that with Anna and Mercedes today. They had an interaction, and now we've got something new to kind of think about and talk about. They should follow up on that. With whatever the result is next week. And I want to see more of that, even in the context of them wrestling a bunch of people because it's tournament time. I still want the focus to be anyone who thinks of Fletcher or Ospreay is thinking about, will they meet and what will it mean? And I hope they meet, and what will the ramifications of it be?
Yeah, because it's just like Ospreay, they had the match. Ospreay lost, and then he was gone for like a week. Yeah. And then he came back, or I don't even think he was gone. He was gone at Dynamite. He came back on Collision to do his first match for the C2. And then there was never, like, he never talked about the match, and it's just been the C2 for that forward. So at some point, like a promo would be nice.
And if Ospreay's going to be gone, you can do two things. You can hang a lantern on it, shine a light on it, go, he's not here, he's back home. Let's bring him on the phone for commentary. And he can agitate Don Callis with some, kind of orchestrated but hopefully natural sounding, poking and prodding when Callis is on commentary. And Shivani's like, oh, we got a special guest joining us by long distance, whatever. Or if he's going to be gone next week, plan ahead. Do a sit-down interview in the afternoon or after the show. And and then you don't have to say it was taped. Go just do fresh footage. The next week and make it go, yeah, we're talking. And I mean, fans in the building might be like, why didn't he come out to see us? And that's not good. But, or they could say, we interviewed this a couple days ago, but it's a fresh interview and no one's seen it yet. And yeah, like really I underline it. I don't think it's even on Tony Khan's radar to like pick out the equivalent of the NBA starters and give them minutes and put time during the week. Get off Twitter X for a couple hours and just sit down and every week really put time into. It's like Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara told me when I interviewed them about Vince McMahon. They'd walk up to the dining room table at Vince's house and he'd go, what do you got for Austin? What do you got for Stone Cold? Next question, an hour later, what have you got for Rock? Next question, an hour later, what have you got for everybody else? And that takes 15 minutes. You go, sounds good. Go do it. Like, I don't think it should be that narrow because they don't have a Stone Cold or a Rock, but they need to have substantial, meaty discussions if you're Tony Khan every week about what are we doing with Ospreay this week, and there has to be substance on Dynamite. And they're just not. That's not the business they're in, and I think it's hurting them because they're not creating and elevating stars. They're hiring people, and then they just stay at that water level for the most part. And Zach, you can list 4 exceptions, I know, but for the most part, I want to see them elevate stars with the TV exposure and time that they have.
And parts I just like reflexively cringe anytime somebody quotes or mentions Vince Russo. It just makes my skin crawl.
Yeah,
but
I apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah,
but the point that you made stands. That they could do a better job of establishing people. I just don't want them to turn into characters in that, because I mean I genuinely hate that word because it just
you've told me you say personas. You've told me. Have you noticed I'm saying personas more?
Because it just feels like when you say character, like they're playing a role in it. That just grates on me. But I had 2 other things I want to talk about. One good, one not so good. We'll start with the not so good, and that's the Adam Cole MJF stuff. for lack of better term, that's going on. Thank God Adam Cole won, so we could get to this match and God willing be done with this, because this has been tough to watch every week. Like, we got to sit through Jericho as it is. We don't need two of these things that we're just like cringing our way through. I'm glad MJF decided to come to work tonight, even if it was for like a total of 6 minutes. But yeah,
was it even 6 minutes? I guess it was. He got out of the car and then stood on the ring apron
and got kicked
I
in the
think
face.
That's generous. I don't know. I think it might have been closer to like 5, because we saw his back. That could have been a stunt double, Wade. We don't know.
That's true. Well, maybe, yeah.
But this feud has not been good. It's been hurt by the fact that MJF hasn't been there. We just need to get to this Cole MJF match at World's End a year later, put Cole over, and call it a day.
And with MJF, when they get him every week again, I'll use my NBA analogy. MJF's a guy who gets past the ball after the other team scores or a rebound, and he just drives to the basket and over dribbles, and then tries to blow past the defense and doesn't even think of passing. It just drives the back, like it's just per force. Like he goes out there on his promos, and it's like, how am I going to give the biggest promo I ever gave this week? Like when he's in the building, and it's like for him, he's like, I feel like he rates his promo on how long did I talk, how many things did I say to offend people, and what are people talking about me on social media? And I stepping away from that mentality, I think is part of what Mox's character is driven by. It's what William Regal's YouTube videos are driven by. It's like, think about how this fits in to get your opponents over, get your feud over, pace yourself, and don't think about social media buzz. Not that that is bad if you get some, but that should be a side effect of fundamentally strong persona building, not character building, Zach, persona building. And with MJF, with MJF, I want to see a more nuanced, frankly, kind of a more mature, pulled back, less is more approach to his promos, instead of this just plow through everybody, just over dribble and drive to the basket. And that's what his promos are like, using my NBA analogy. And I want to see a more mature version of him where it's okay to show up to work and not take up 12 minutes of TV time seeing how much you can push the envelope and say offensive things to create a buzz. And I hope we get that once we move on from this Adam Cole thing. He is so immensely talented, and you know, there's so much for him to give this business, but I think it's time to kind of step back a little bit from what he's been doing and have an honest, hopefully he has had honest conversations with people about, you know, how can I dial back and a little less is more with him, because he oozes so much star power in a way that most people don't, and self-confidence, that I think he actually ends up undercutting it when he it's like he's trying too hard when he is around. Anyway, Zach, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think MJF is a great promo, but he does sometimes, as you know, they will point out on commentary, go for like the lowest hanging fruit, and it's just like the easiest stuff to like get to. You know, it's like you can be a little more thoughtful than that. I'm just kind of wondering where he goes. Let's assume he loses to Adam Cole, and we all move on with our lives after World's End. I mean, does he go back to feuding with Danny? Does he go to feud with Danny Garcia over the TNT title, which seems a little beneath him, because it's the TV title, and it just seems kind of weird.
I don't know. I mean, is there anything beneath him at this point? I mean, Chris Johnson says Adam Cole feels like the coldest wrestler in America right now. I heard he was laughing during that match like a minor laugh in a sitcom. Both Adam Cole and MJF, once they're separated, I don't care what they do. It's just, if it's different than what they've been doing, and I don't think there's anything too small for them to do. I just want them to do something that feels coherent, just easy to comprehend, and is just more fundamentally basic. Adam Cole and MJF both have a lot of talent, and just the broad brushstrokes of what they were trying to do, and for so long it was too much. It just, sometimes just be who you are and keep it simple. And both of them, I think, would benefit from just being part of something where they can just do a timeless, fundamental story arc that lasts 3 months, and just let everyone take a deep breath and get away from this.
Yep.
Yeah. Rich, do you want to jump in on any of this before Zach moves on?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, I agree with everything. There wasn't much for me to jump into because it'd just be me verbally nodding along. MJF, Derek just nailed it. He has been in this loop of go through my gauntlet, go through my gauntlet, go through my gauntlet. And while his look is matured over the years, he looks like $1 million. The tans come and go. Clearly, he's in this movie. That's great for him. AEW, again, like you said before, from a management standpoint, they need to figure out what MJF is for them. And they need to sit him down just kind of like they sat other folks down and say, okay, in this role, you need to, load management. Like
Ramen Noodle says load management, Max. Yes.
And then also, they got to give him third rails. Like Max, when you first got hired, we told you eventually to stop talking about the weight of fans in the stands. We told you not to comment on certain physical maladies of people in the stands. Yeah. Now, as you've matured, you can't go to these low-hanging fruit, unhoused people aren't a joke. Going to talk about, even with Christian, I'm going to beat you back into relapse for Jon Moxley. That's more out of taste than his dad jokes. And with MJF, it's the same thing. We need to kind of mature a little bit because I don't think it's going to help your character if you're just the guy who gets to say poopy pee pants when no one else can.
Yeah. Well put. Zach, back to you. You had or you want to move on to the good thing?
Yes. I think we've given that story enough oxygen.
Yeah.
The other thing to talk about is FTR sort of challenging the Death Riders and setting up a match for the mother of all simulcasts on January 1st. My guess, I don't think we have an actual match this weekend with them. My guess is we set up a trios match, whether it's for the titles or not, and we get an Adam Copeland return. I like that idea. Like I said, in my column on the site, most of the good stuff we remember from like the golden period of the NWO had nothing to do with Hulk Hogan. Go figure. It was, DDP and Savage. It was the Steiners and the Outsiders. It was the, Six and Ric Flair, or Six and Eddie Guerrero, or it was the offshoot stuff that we remember way more fondly than anything to do with with the world title picture. So like having other members of the Death Riders involved in side stories, beyond shadowing Mox and fighting the people he's fighting, I think would be a good thing for that story. And bringing Copeland back to something important, but where he's not by himself, and he doesn't have to carry the whole match or feel compelled to jump off of high things and hurt himself is good.
WWE's doing enough of that. Rich, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that now, Zach, what's one thing you think they could do to fix this before I jump in? Like to make the persona work with your one good thing. I'm sorry, my brain shut down for literally half a second, so English is failing me right now.
Fix whose persona, Rich?
Who did you just say? I'm sorry. My brain literally
Copeland?
shut down. Edge. Oh, FTR. So like with FTR, like what could they do to make you feel like they're gonna have a match? Because right now it feels like they're a placeholder, right? Like in their promo, I really enjoyed the fact that they started with, we had to come out and stop a murder. And they just said it matter-of-factly before they got into like everything else. So like what could they do to kind of like make that seem more important than what it was? Because I think right now they were treating it almost like, how did we have to stop a murder at work? Like they're the person who really needs to go to HR and make a complaint. So what's their next step with this stuff? Like, are they going to be feuding with the Death Riders? You say you want to have stories for the other members of the quartet, so to speak, but how do they get involved without it just seeming like they're the villains of the week?
I assume, they're going to have that promo confrontation on Collision because, FTR said, meet us in the center of the ring on Collision. So I assume we get whatever that ends up being, and that is the sort of the precipitating event to set up the trios match at Fight for the Fallen, and then we kind of go from there. Whatever happens, whether that's some sort of, I would guess it'd probably be like a non-title match that FTR, that would rated FTR can win, and then set up a match where they can either win or lose in Australia or Revolution or whatever, because they desperately need something to do besides doing the Predator handshake with the Outrunners.
And I apologize. Like I said, my brain shut down because you mentioned all the side effects of the NWO not involving Hogan. And part of it's the meds and part of it's just the way my brain. I always think of my favorite non-NWO like super popular moment was that a running joke Chris Maitland, Pro Wrestling Coast to Coast, and I will always talk about is the fact that Jeff Jarrett was the only person that could control Scott Steiner once he joined the NWO. Like they'd always have arguments in the back, and he's like, "How can you, Jeff?" Like, and it's like, why is Jeff Jarrett the guy you need to like de-escalate this? Like, why is he your like Binky or your like a thunder blanket, like when the pups get a little worried during storms? So that was just a funny like side effect. FTR seems to do the same thing for AEW, and that's where I got like wound up, because they're always the people. If you want a good match, they'll give it to you. They'll make any storyline you throw at them work to the best of their ability, and they will find a third person for their 6-man tag, no matter how hard. Like first it was Punk, now it's Copeland. They will find a person to bring him into their calm group.
Zach's speculation. Yes. Zach, anything else quick you want to give? We got an outside correspondent I want to get to, and then we'll wrap up with our emails. But
I think that's it. I'll be interested to see how Toni Storm sort of explains how she has regained her sanity. I mean, because we watched. I mean, that was the best part of the whole thing. We watched her lose her mind. Like we saw her going to this completely delusional world, and now she is seemingly sort of regained herself. So I will be interested to see how she explains that. But yeah, I think that's it for tonight.
Great. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it. Good talking with you.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. Let's go ahead and bring on-site correspondent Greg into the mix. Greg, thanks for joining us. You attended Dynamite tonight. How was it?
I did attend Dynamite. Are you able to hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I never not have a good time at wrestling shows, so I enjoyed myself, and it was a good show with a good crowd. I was concerned going into the show because it was playing at the big arena in Kansas City that WWE plays at all the time, instead of the smaller instead of the smaller arena that played at the last few times. But I guess there was a hockey game going on at that arena, so they played at the T-Mobile Center, and I thought for the setup that I didn't think it came off bad at all, and I was concerned about that. As far as the setup went, I mean, it looked like about 3/4 to a little over 3/4 of the seats that were available were filled, and I mean, it was I know there's been some flack for some of the crowds recently. I thought this was a good crowd for the most part. There were times where they were more active than other times, but I thought it was a good crowd for the most part.
So WrestleTix had them at just over 4,000, close to showtime, and then there's additional walk-up that doesn't get accounted for. So, I don't know if they ended up at 4,500 or something like that. But yeah, and I mean, you cut off a third of the building. You're down to about 12,000 seats when you do the staging, and then you cut off some of the upper deck, and you can end up looking pretty decent. I mean, the camera angle was still just aimed at the opposite of the hard cam in the stage area, but it looks solid. I mean, I don't think anyone was watching that show thinking, "Oh my God, this is a bad crowd." That's why I say the sweet spot to look good in a big arena is around 4,000, and they got there. So it looked good. I mean, you'd like to be packing the place and do wide angle shots, but that's not where they are right now. So, but it didn't jump out. I want to ask you, Greg, just how many AEW shows have you been to roughly?
I've been to 3, each of them in Kansas City.
Okay. So what stood out as different in terms of the energy and the sense of enthusiasm for the product? Did it feel about the same, different, better than last time, but worse than 2 times ago? Like, yeah, just kind of assess very broadly that aspect of it.
If I were to make a direct comparison, that would be kind of hard for me to do, but I would say certainly probably maybe around the same as 2023 and a little less so than 2021. But I thought for like just in general, like the stuff that the crowd was really up for, they were really up for. Like
so
I would say,
so yeah, what was that? Like, talk about what they.
Well, particularly, I'd say Death Riders, and I've been kind of iffy on all of this, but they got the reaction. They got the kind of reaction that you'd want them to get tonight. Obviously, Will Ospreay was super over, and then probably the person who got the biggest reaction, it might be just because it was a return, was Toni Storm. The crowd was really happy to see her back, and they also reacted well to the match that she had on the Rampage taping.
Greg, I'll say from an audio standpoint, you're overmodulating a little bit, and you're a little bit loud. So if you just move the mic about a half inch to an inch away, you're going to be perfect.
Okay, am I better here?
Yeah. Don't change anything.
Okay.
Just move the mic just slightly away, then it won't overmodulate.
Okay.
It wasn't bad. It's just I'm got my headphones. I hear everything so clearly, and I'm
okay.
post produce. Like I think about this stuff. The Toni Storm thing. What did you think of her coming out to not her alter ego personality, but herself? And did it seem like that? It's hard to guess, but do you think the crowd was reacting, hey, Toni Storm's back? Or were they reacting to timeless Toni Storm and not really registering that this is like actually the absence of something in addition to the return of something?
I didn't get the impression I got the impression they were just reacting to the return of her period. That was my thought on it.
Yeah.
And then they threw Thunder Rosa out there. I wonder if that was a deliberate decoy, like, oh, she's going to be the next challenger, but then it's actually Toni Storm.
And it could be to fill in some time if they don't go right to the Toni Storm match too. So tell me about Mariah May and how she came across to you in a main event type spot. Did she? You're in the building. Did she, and a big part of being a main event star is, do you fill the space that you're given? Did she fill the space she was given? Did she come across to you like a main event champion star? Because, I mean, I thought her ring entrance, she had a real good swagger to her. Yeah. I think she has that aspect, but you're in the building. How did it feel?
Yeah, I thought so. And I'm somebody who's been critical of the presentation of the AEW women's division, but I thought so for her on a personal level. I thought so. And the crowd was pretty into the match from the beginning. I think you got more into it as particularly towards the climax with the near falls, but I thought she came off like a main event level star.
And then tell me about Will Ospreay in that respect. I thought he had, his ring gear, there was a lot of energy in the ring entrance. It felt like there was, maybe I'm making this up or it's not true, but it felt like there was a little bit more effort in his ring entrance to kind of play to the crowd and bring them into the moment.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah, he was. It'd be either outside of Tony, it's either him or the Death Riders most over on the show. I would say that. Yeah, there was a ton of energy into his entrance, and for sure, I would agree with that. And the match with Claudio, like you would expect, ebbs and flows in terms of like the climaxes and everything. But yeah,
was there anything that didn't land? That stands out. Anything that didn't work with the live audience?
Oh, probably the. But I mean, I would say, relatively speaking, the crowd wasn't as vocal during the Adam Cole Kyle O'Reilly match. Doesn't mean they weren't into it, but they definitely weren't as vocal. And then the Brody King Ricochet match, although Brody King did have a pretty, I don't know if it came off on TV, the vocal barking and everything. So I mean, Brody's pretty over, and he was more over than Ricochet for what it's worth by a pretty good margin.
Interesting, yeah. Was there anything off camera before or after the show, or perhaps during commercials that stood out to you?
There were two dark matches that aired. One of them was, we'll get a load of this one, Colt Cabana versus Satnam Singh. And then we also had Dark Order versus Serpentico and Evil Uno. So, and then after
we just buried the league.
Wait, Dark Order against Evil Uno?
Wait, it was. Oh, I'm sorry. Dark Order versus. I apologize. I got mixed up. Serpentico and. Oh God, I apologize. I made a mistake. Serpentico and guy who they did the storyline with, it took him forever to win a match, and he finally got a contract. Masked wrestler. His name's escaping me. It was a collision. It was a Rampage storyline a few years ago. I think he lost a bunch of matches, then got a contract after losing to Miro on TV. I can't. His name is escaping me, though. Oh my gosh!
El Fuego was back.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Cool.
I can't. I mean, his name is escaping me for the weirdest reason.
Was he part of? I think he was part of Cody's crew. Like, would hang out with him, and then he kind of
disappeared
for us. So, Yeah. So Rich, you said bearing the lead. Is that because of Colt Cabana, Satnam Singh?
Yes.
Fuego del Sol.
I need to know more about this, Greg. I
Yeah.
must know
Talk
everything.
about that
So
match.
the match went. I mean, it probably lasted about 5 minutes. It was mostly Colt stalling and and doing all kinds of things to make the match extend out. But it ended the way you would expect it to, with Satnam Singh going over. But I mean, it probably went about 5 minutes with a lot of stalling and a lot of working the crowd, a lot of working the people at ringside on Colt Cabana's part.
A few years ago when I went to a Rampage, Colt was the most over guy in the building. How was the crowd reaction for him? Did it seem like today's 4,000 plus audience in Kansas City knew who he was and was into him, or was it like, oh, what's going on? Let's go.
Well, there were a good number of people who knew who he was. I mean, that'll be credit to the crowd because he hasn't been doing much as far as televised wrestling goes in a while. So, there was a good number of people who knew him. You can kind of tell who the more maybe quote unquote hardcore portions of the fan base are. There was a good number of people in the arena who knew who Colt is. Did
Tony Khan speak to you?
He came out for about 30 seconds right before Dynamite went on air. Then he came out after Dynamite and as enthusiastic and as excited as ever.
As deep voiced? Everybody.
Yes, indeed, deep voiced. Yes, if you see, maybe there will be videos. Maybe videos will pop up of him talking to the crowd, and just as deep throated and enthusiastic as ever.
It'd be disappointing if that Tony. We'll know something's wrong when Tony comes out and doesn't have high energy and the effort to have the deepest voice.
For sure.
Rich, anything you want to ask Greg about his experience tonight?
Yes, Greg. So you said you've been to several shows in the Kansas City region. For you, with the AEW energy, regardless of size, how do you feel like? Has it been consistent, ebbs and flows in terms of crowd, or is this on par with the other experiences you've had?
Definitely on par with the 2023 experience. I'd say 2021's a little harder to gouge because it was a few years ago. It was also when AEW was objectively quote unquote hotter business wise than it is now. But I think it very much compared well with the last show. And honestly, recency bias, but I might have that crowd a little bit ahead of the last show. Although I'd have to go back and look at what was on the card for the last show, to be honest. That was Title Tuesday, I believe. That was Adam Copeland and Luchasaurus in the main event. That was Adam Copeland's first in-ring AEW match. So
that probably was a lot of energy. And then with, I guess my last question would be with the Ricochet stuff. On television, it was clear there were boos leading to the finish, but then once he won, there were cheers. Was that reflective of what was in the audience? I know you said Brody kind of had his own kind of cheering section.
Yeah, I thought Brody came off to be his way more over than Ricochet did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, he was got a far better reaction. Was
there a video segment that got over with the crowd or a non-in-ring segment? I'll throw Christian into that. But there was Jericho doing the minute thing. There was FTR interview. Yeah, anything just stand out to you as far as
out of those, Christian's promo got the most. Christian from the upper, speaking from the Skybox, got the most heat of all of those promos. Not necessarily Skybox, Upper Deck, but his got more heat than say Jericho's pre-tape promo or Darby's promo wasn't designed to get heat, but certainly I'd say Christian. Oh, but then frickin' Don Callis blew that all away during the Rampage taping with the boos that he got. Of course, that was an in-ring segment, though. But I mean, him and Christian were super over with that in a heel heat way.
With a little spoiler warning, do you want to talk a little bit about the Rampage tapings?
Yeah, sure. You guys just want me to go through the matches?
Yeah. That counts as a spoiler warning for everyone who. I mean,
they aired the Chris Jericho Matt Cardona contract signing, which is going to be airing on Honor Club tomorrow, and then the Rampage taping was, I believe, they taped the main event first. It was Will Hobbs and Mark Davis versus Takeshita and Lance Archer. And then there was also Toni Storm made her in-ring return against Harley Cameron.
Oh, wow.
And there was a Deonna Purrazzo squash match. And then it was mentioned during Dynamite. And I actually ducked out before this match. It was Matt Cardona versus Brian Keith. So I didn't stick around to see the result of that match.
Yeah. All right, very good. Did Cardona get a pop from the crowd? If we're going to talk about Colt's pop, did Matt Cardona get a pop?
It was right after Dynamite ended, but he, got a pretty decent reaction. I didn't think it was on par with the other people we've talked about, but he certainly got a decent reaction.
Greg, anything else you want to add before we let you go?
No, I'm glad I'm able to hopefully able to keep your audience entertained after 2 hours of talking about wrestling on a Wednesday night. So I'm like the main event here. So I hope I've lived up to my end of the bargain.
Thanks, Greg. You did. We'll let everyone
thank you,
forever.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
all
Greg.
right, thank you, Rich, and thank you, Wade.
Thanks. All right, Rich. Let's just race through some email comments, and we'll sign off here. Chris Johnson chimed in and said the Bandito vignette is supposed to be campy. I get it, but it's just incredibly stupid to me, like 1993 WWF level Drek. Rich, we didn't talk about that. We had the weird thing last week that I thought was a commercial for some insurance company where it's like has nothing to do with the product, but it just felt like a cheesy commercial. And then it was like Bandito wanted, and then this week a whole sketch. They're doing like it's sort of like, okay, I give him credit for trying to do something other than Bandito showing up in Excalibur saying his moves are great and it's great to have him back. They're doing more. There's effort there, but it's just not. It's not part of, I think, what's going to be the identifying trait that AEW fans are going to take pride in is this cinematic, super cheesy, fake introductory video with no context. Did AEW do this with tongue in cheek? Are they in on it? Are we supposed to believe this really happened? Of course not. Like, what is? It's just like. It's a cute idea that somebody had and they executed and they put a lot of work into it. And now we kind of have a sense of Bandito's character that we didn't before when his name is, Bandit. So what's your take on it?
You went WWE, I went WCW.
Yeah. Yes. Zach Barber said it's a Pace Picante sauce commercial. It did resemble that.
It is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It is. And I was like, they made the sauce in New York City. And I know exactly the one. For me, it's the White Castle of Fear meets 1888. It's just, you have all these Western-based characters in AEW. And so they have the market cornered between Hangman Page and the Bad Apple and now Bandito. And I think they're taking them too literally. And it's before I mentioned on Blue Sky, you would get these videos before someone debuted immediately into the ring. Like remember Cole, or you remember Adam Copeland, or even the return of Moxley, things like that. Having this show up for Bandito, I appreciate the advance. Bandito's coming, but am I to believe like he just randomly shows up in towns and starts fighting the law? Because that sort of thing is a little. It's so weird. I always err on the side of it's weird or cool enough. I'll let it go. I'm willing to let it ride out because I know he's such a good wrestler. But once he gets to the ring, he still is a really good wrestler who wears a mask. Like they have to give him more, and this isn't helping him with the more. It's just making it harder to understand.
There's just no sense of like a structure and identity to this company anymore. And they're just not detail oriented. Like, they're celebrating that outside interference isn't allowed in the Continental Classic. Guess what? It's not allowed ever. Except in an ODQ match. It's in one-on-one matches, outside interference is not legal. That's not a new rule in the Continental Classic, but they keep stressing that. What's different is nobody's allowed at ringside. But what they don't address is the obvious thing that pops into my head, which is, what if somebody runs to ringside? They're not allowed, and they interfere. People interfere all the time when they're at ringside. That's breaking a rule. What's stopping people from running in from the back and interfering? What's stopping them is what they're not saying, which is it's like when you drive through a construction zone and they say fines are double in this area.
Yeah.
That's what they just need to say. I still have my problem with it, but they need to say fines are quadrupled and suspensions start at 1 year. That's how serious we are about the purity of Continental Classic matches. Too much is at stake. And then what I want to hear is I want Shivani or whoever, or I want Shivani to say, you know what? Why don't we do that always? We should always just have, I want to see the wrestlers in the ring decide matches. And Excalibur can have some comeback, which is, that's something that should be discussed. And if they care so much about the purity of these outcomes so that they won't allow anyone at ringside for interference, how about a second referee at ringside to catch low blows? There's no attention to detail on this stuff. And so, like the Bandito, so it doesn't surprise me if they're just throwing this just vacuous touting of, oh, we don't allow outside interference, isn't that great? Not realizing they never allow outside interference. It's not legal. It's not unique to the Continental Classic, and it doesn't even cross their mind. Let's make this a little bit more of a sophisticated framing of things. It doesn't surprise me they go, hey, Bandito, he's an outlaw. We'll do a wanted poster. Isn't this cute? It goes back to the nonsense at Roderick Strong's house with Adam Cole. How was he there all the time, like for weeks, or did they film all those skits at once? Like they never filter things through any kind of like logic. Does this make sense? Filter. And I'm sorry, that bothers me, and I don't think I'm alone. It doesn't like they're like, we want to make people think the Continental Classic is serious, so we're going to say no interference. But they don't realize how just stupid that sounds, because it's, for the third time, it's not legal in regular matches either. And they don't even, how does that not cross their mind to do a better job with this? And so the Bandito thing, it's like, how are we supposed to interpret this? I think
two things, Wade.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to read standard deviation. He just said, Bandito must be wealthy. He created a cinematic promotional material, filmed and produced with hired actors, and then sent it to AEW to air on TV to intimidate his opponents. And I think standard deviation's doing that a bit tongue-in-cheek. Zach Barber said, isn't the point of vignettes to establish context? What is the context? That there's a scripted tongue-in-cheek skit on some Hollywood set that we don't know why it aired or why it happened, and it doesn't serve a purpose. I don't think people are more intimidated by Bandito because he was part of a cinematic skit. Like, I just don't get it. So go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I was thinking first, the Continental Classic last year. At some point, Tony said if you interfered, you'd be fired or suspended. Which I was like, okay.
Yeah, they said that last year. Yep.
Where's Miro? Where's like Andrade? Like, are these guys just gonna? That's how they're gonna get themselves fired. Like, hey, I touched him. I'm out of here. See you guys later.
Yeah, really.
Like we're.
That's a little meta, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but then with Ring of Honor, you also have the Code of Honor, where you're not supposed to interfere or do any of those nefarious things. So you have these structures in place, but they're kind of added on. And then with Bandito, yes, I'm a big fan of the White Castle of Fear, Cheatham, the Angry Dwarf, and all that stuff. This just took me back to that, and I will admit, hands in the air, I enjoyed it for the silliness. But when you think about what you're saying, the real deal ramifications going forward, there really isn't a way forward for Bandito with this stuff. And back when he came to Ring of Honor, before Ring of Honor died, and then Tony hired him, Bandito was cool just because he was Bandito. And that isn't going to be enough, or maybe it will. I don't know.
What are people thinking after watching this skit? Like, honestly, what is the goal of this vignette, this little video? What was the point? Like, well, we want people to know Bandito's coming back. Right? But why did you choose this way to tell us? Is this a reality? Is it fiction? Did he produce it? Excalibur could just say, you know what? Tony Khan, everybody's a big fan of Bandito. He's been gone. Now he's back. Here's the context of it. And we put together a fun little video to let people know, who Bandito, what inspires Bandito. When it's old Westerns, and he's got a great sense of humor. Like, you could literally, refine that somewhat, but frame it in a way where we're not insulted by it. We're like, oh, this is a fun little video that AEW put together with Bandito to celebrate his pending return. Some might say, well, that's implied, you're overthinking it. But if it was a company that had a consistent kind of vibe and identity, then this might fit into that. But it doesn't fit into anything because AEW is a bunch of things that are undefined and sloppy. So anyway, yeah.
We just saw the November Rain music video be borrowed from ECW lore and brought to AEW.
Yeah.
You could do a video of the best of Bandito set to music, and that would have been far more instructive than
there you go. Yep.
Just
Zach Barber's putting up a good fight in the chat room, and I'm not. He's flailing, and I'm not going to read it. So back to Chris's email, Chris Johnson. He goes, Christian is good, but when he cuts a promo on Moxley, it's a heel cutting a promo on a heel, and the heel on the receiving end of the promo has babyface motivations. I just don't care. I care more about Hook versus Christian than Christian in the world title picture. By the way, Standard Deviation said, I'll add to this. Whoops. Standard deviation. Oh, God, I keep clicking on the wrong one here. I didn't like the cameraman waiting for Hook to appear behind Christian. How would he know? By the way, WWE's super guilty about this too. This is so easy to clean up. It just takes a little extra effort, little extra thought. But this idea of cameras hovering on something that with no idea that something interesting is about to happen, and then something interesting happens, totally breaks my immersion in the show. Because it's like, why is Christian walking to the other room, and why is the camera following him? Oh, because we need Hook behind glass. And by the way, if you're going to break glass on a door, don't use the outside handle. Reach through the broken glass to unlock the door so it looks like you had a purpose for breaking the glass. That's a super small detail, but like, you break the glass so you can unlock the door and get in. I think that was, I don't think it was just break glass to scare him. Maybe it was, but so yeah, I don't know. But so yeah, the camera hovering and then Hook happens to show up. It's like, oh, what are the odds that the camera's aiming exactly there? Again, AEW puts no logic, realism filter through anything that they do. It's just, let's get this filmed. And they need people who care about that stuff. It all adds to that just sense of immersion and realism that pulls you in. And it's why in TV shows they want real looking sets and actors who are good and lighting that seems natural. And I mean, you want to make things as realistic as possible because it pulls people into that world. And AEW and WWE are both guilty of needlessly, excessively, sloppily, infuriatingly not caring about this stuff. And it undercuts the vibe of the product. Rich?
Yeah, I have on in the background Modern Family, and I'm imagining if they used an 80s set for this show and how jarring it would be. And same thing with AEW. You have all these technological advances. You have Turner. Let's lean into more of that stuff and not as much. Like for me, I remember when they did the same exact spot in Pittsburgh, and I was working at Pitt at the time. And I will say, since now I no longer work there and I can kind of peek behind the curtain, there was a little concern because no one told them they were going to have a baseball bat go through the window of a club seat with a basketball game the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a very awkward conversation to have. And, you know, obviously Tony took care of the business and got it fixed, but it was like, okay, that was cool, but maybe next time let them know. And that's something where, you know, a detail you should follow up on, like the importance of checking with the venue. And those are little things where when you're the number 2 company in North America, these aren't mistakes you should make. I was saying, you know, a lot of times with AEW, we look at it as if it's the Dodgers. I heard you and Todd talking. You think about the Dodgers and the Yankees and how, WWE seen as this huge monolith. Well, AEW's funded like the Dodgers as well. It's not like this is the Pirates versus the Yankees or the Pirates versus the Dodgers or the Twins versus the Dodgers. This is the Red Sox versus the Yankees or Red Sox versus the Dodgers. These are folks with a lot of money, and you can hire people to be your ombudsman or your logic person or your, someone mentioned in the chat earlier tonight, the idea of hiring middle management to be the bad guy.
Yeah. In real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Not
not Adam
That
Pearce,
would be a step worse. It's like, I've hired these people to pretend to be bad guys. No.
So Derek Mitchell said, Rich, I like your idea of playing a music video package for Bandito. If Tony likes buying songs, he can buy Wanted Dead or Alive for Bandito.
I was thinking of the same song, Derek. Oh my God. You just went into that. Yeah. I'm exactly with you on that one.
Zach Barber says, the camera thing with Hook and Christian was silly. I agree. Standard Deviation said one solution would have been to cut to the side shot of Christian a few times during his promo, rather than only cutting to it once at the very end. That works, but I would say even better, and frankly, more obviously, is have Christian doing a promo, and you're not aiming at a door with a window in it, because they never do that. And then there's a banging noise. And the camera turns towards the banging noise. And it's Hook behind the door, banging on the glass. I mean, it's just not... That's what I say about this. People are like, oh, who cares about this stuff? I care because it's so freaking easy to fix. It takes 2 extra seconds of thought to just have something play out like it might logically in real life, which is a camera's aiming one way, they hear a noise, they point the other. That's why I'm about WWE with all these filming people on their phone. Why are we filming people texting on their phone as some reason? Like, it's just so it's so stupid. It infuriates me. Like, why? No, you would not choose to film someone on their phone. And if it's real, you would not choose to film someone on their phone. And if it's real, you would not know something very interesting is about to happen with somebody about to walk in for a segment that will actually add content. It just, don't do that. Like, just go. We're going backstage because this wrestler is about to walk up to Adam Pearce, and show the wrestler walking up to Pearce. Don't show Pearce for no reason and the wrestler walking up to him. And again, I just wrestling to be more immersive. And I think it helps the whole product when it's immersive and doesn't jar you out of reality. Back to Chris. I started watching wrestling again last summer after a 23-year hiatus. I've heard the name Matt Cardona many times on wrestling podcasts since last summer. Now I know what he looks like. So another example of why assume no knowledge. If you're AEW, don't think a guy's going to walk in and your whole audience is going to be like, whoa, how cool. Like, who is he? And if you don't have time to establish who someone is, don't put him on your TV. I mean, just like, either go all in or don't. I mean, and it's ROH, and I mean, I get that, but anyway. Adam Cole still cold as ice. Kyle O'Reilly blaming Adam Cole in the Undisputed Kingdom for Roddy getting hurt is really stupid. Baby faces that are really hard to root for. That, the whole lot. Adam Cole looks like he loses 5 to 10 more pounds every week to me. The gym wouldn't hurt O'Reilly either. O'Reilly's always had a little bit of a, just looks like he's fighting a little bit of flab. Oh, always. Like, it's just his genetics, and I don't need him to look any different. Cole does vary sometimes between looking like just his gym membership expired and he didn't bother to renew it, and you're a professional athlete, try to look toned. Don't be Buddy Murphy, but look like you want to be strong enough where a punch hurts. It is a cosmetic business in that way, and I think it does undercut Cole a little bit. Rich, I'm the opposite of a guy who I rip on Buddy Murphy for being needlessly jacked. Like, it's just over jacked, and it's like Billy Gunn is counterproductively needlessly tall. He just makes everyone look short, but no one thinks of him as tall. Buddy Murphy needs to just chill the F out and just be an athlete, but not every week have his shoulders be 1 inch broader and be more prone to just some sort of, tricep tear, which is going to happen because that's what happens to people his size. Every time Buddy gets a photo with his wife and he's the person standing off to the side in the aisle of the grocery store and the fan is super happy, those traps grow 3 inches because he's just seething. They're like, could you take our picture? He's like, well, who are you? It's like, no one ever knows who he is, and they're always taking her picture. And for those who don't know, Rhea Ripley and Buddy Matthews are married, and every picture is him angrily off to the side as someone takes a picture with his wife and does not it's clear they're not recognizing him either. And it's like, that's why he needs the traps, Wade. That's why the traps are for him. It makes no difference. Zach says Wade really doesn't like Buddy Matthews. No, I actually go back and read my coverage of him in WWE. I thought he should have gotten a push. I like him. I want him to stay healthy, and I want him to actually be agile. He's not going to get a push because he has more muscles. He's going to get a push because he can work an athletic match. And I'm actually a big fan of Buddy Matthews. And so when you criticize someone, not out of anger, but because you think your critique will help them, that is liking them, not disliking them. You are, like, I always say this to you, Zach. You're not helping AEW by ignoring their weaknesses and trying to gloss over their weaknesses. You help AEW by pointing out what the weaknesses are that are holding them back. So there are people in AEW who can't, but would back me up on this. They're like, criticize what needs to be criticized about this company so we can grow. That's what they want. All right. There's a line in the I think it was Cash who said, FTR, we have no problem with the Death Riders, but if they have a problem with us, then we'll meet on Rampage. What was that line, Rich? That was nuts. A prudent comment by Cash to say we don't have a problem with them. How can you not have a problem with them? They tried to kill Danielson. They're trying to take over AEW. Like, what?
You just said you tried to stop a murder.
How do you not say, okay, pause, let's retake this? I don't care if Cash is in a mood because you do that. You got to call people out when they say something completely counterproductive to what the entire story arc of Moxley should be pissed at that.
Yeah. And if Moxley's whole goal, even think about what they did in the beginning of the evening where they talk about, and we didn't even talk about this yet, the conceit of they've hidden the AEW title. It could be in the nuclear suitcase that Marina has on her at all times. It could be in a wood chipper. And they're like, we don't deserve to see the title because it's been sullied and non-deserving, all this stuff. So when you get these guys to come out and say, we don't really have a quarrel with you. We just stopped a murder and it's fine. That really, what is the point of having an all-encompassing evil group if the good people don't see them as worthy of fighting?
Yeah. All right, Chris says the AEW worship promos like the one Darby gave tonight are off-putting to me. It just feels weird. I don't like them as a rule, but I think if Moxley his character is, I want to take over AEW, and that's your big story arc, is sloppy and poorly as I would argue it's been executed, as flawed as it's been. The story arc is Darby saying, he's a threat to everything AEW stands for. I'm here to represent it. I think Darby is a guy who can get away with it. I don't want to hear it from many other people. But Darby's character is built around, they gave me a chance and I succeeded and I'm loyal to them. And he's an original and he is a very good spokesman representing the company. So I disagree with Chris on this. In general, AEW worshiping the company that you work for, if you're a pro wrestler, is not badass. It makes you feel like a sycophant. Wrestling fans don't want corporate raw people to cheer for. They want, they want outlaws. They want people who are out for themselves. Yeah. Even they want to cheer good people, but the good people are out for them. Cody's out for himself. I don't want to hear Cody saying, I want the good of WWE. I want to cheer Cody to win because Cody's the guy that I think I'm going to be most happy if he succeeds at the expense of others. It's an individual sport. It's not rah the company. But it bothers me less with Darby. Rich?
Yeah, with Darby, especially with the way he explained the Continental Classic is an authentic AEW happening, and he wants to defend the DNA of AEW, and show that it's something worthy. I think that's helpful. And you have standard deviations. Chat here up top, I'd prefer them to interchange their pro AEW with pro wrestling. I think Darby can skirt that line, like you said, but then at the same time, he says these things, and he's like, "That's why I'm here. I want to prove that AEW is safe." But then he's also in the same breath, by the way, I'm going to go climb Mount Everest and plant an AEW flag. That's where you cross the line for me. Now you've gone into the, yay team type stuff. I think about football. There's always going to be a player that says the reason I play football is I can do things on the field I can't do in the street. And that's a very pro wrestlery type of argument for why they would pro wrestle. And I think if Darby stuck to that, it's like, hey, when I skateboard, I'm taking risks. The risks I can take as a pro wrestler, though, give me more thrills than I could ever get even climbing Mount Everest. That's where you have the positive. Not that I'm going to do this thing where people real life die just to plant our flag and say we've discovered Mount Everest for the glory of AEW.
You referred to a text. I'll put it in context for our podcast audio listeners. Standard Deviation said, I'd prefer them to interchange their pro AEW promos with pro wrestling promos. Everyone can get behind pro wrestling. It's less cool to wave a company flag.
Literally.
Yeah. I get what he's saying, and I agree that's better. But I also just think, as a rule, wrestlers should be out for themselves, and we should be rooting for is there a pro sports team, Rich, in the NFL, NHL, NBA, whatever, who's like, boy, I want to represent the NBA. I want our team to represent the NBA. I'm playing hard, not to win, but to represent the NBA or the NHL or what? Justin Jefferson is not out for anything other than his team winning. He wants to win for his teammates, and he wants to be the greatest wide receiver ever or of his generation. It shouldn't be on the top 20 list. I want to help the NFL get bigger and better. The NFL owners are not baby faces. The NFL as a brand is popular, but people don't watch because they're into the brand. They watch because they like their teams, and the NFL does a good job, presenting the show in a major league way. So the players shouldn't be rooting. They don't. That doesn't happen. I don't think it even happens in MMA. I don't know any fighters. Early on, I will say this. Early on, and it's an ECW thing, which is it's us against the world, us against corporate, Ted Turner, Vince McMahon. And we're the misfit toys, and we're counterculture and all that. And the wrong lessons were learned from ECW. That was very unique to their circumstances. Same thing with UFC early on. There was a sense of we're martial artists. We have this setup where we've reduced the rules so that every martial art has a chance to prove it's the best. And it's not as dangerous as people are making it out to be. And it was a cause. There was a belief in this as a sport that could grow. That's not WWE, and frankly, AEW, I think, it's a losing battle to compare themselves to WWE right now. I think AEW should just make their product the best they can be and let it speak for itself. And having wrestlers tout the brand and wave the flag of the brand it's just silly. So anyway,
yeah, the closest would be Rob Lowe when he was sitting at the 50-yard line with the NFL hat, and that looks so disingenuous. I don't know if you've ever seen that with him watching a game. I think it was like an international game. He's like, I just hope the entire league, all 32 teams, do well. That's not conducive to success as a wrestler.
So Zach Barber's trying to make the case here he says, when AEW be the NFL team and not the NFL? People aren't paying to see AEW beat WWE. I mean, some people are. Zach, you might be. There's people who are very partisan towards a brand. But AEW is not going to grow by saying, buy a ticket to AEW to stick it to WWE. That's not what people are paying for. People are buying WWE tickets because they want to see Cody Rhodes. They want to see Roman Reigns. They want to see Rhea Ripley. They want to pop for the babyface. They want to chant. They want to boo Dom. Come on. I mean, AEW needs to get in the business of promoting an entertaining product and stop this war that happens on Twitter but isn't part of the real world. No, stop. It is emblematic of a fatal flaw. I don't say fatal lightly in Tony Khan's approach. If he thinks the marketing of AEW, the way to sell tickets is to pit us against WWE, and you should buy tickets and support us and watch us because we're not WWE. You need to be an alternative to WWE, but you need to be a self-contained, entertaining reason for people to spend money and time watching you. Derek Mitchell says, I don't mind ECW having an us versus world mentality. It is an exception, and it's unique to its time. But AEW's rah-rah speeches from Dax Harwood and Adam Copeland have fallen flat, in my opinion. So, all right. Back to Chris Zebel. It looks like Brody King should beat everybody. He looks good. He looks violent. I love Brody Ricochet. Ricochet sold great for Brody. Yeah, it was a good match. I mean, and yeah. I was watching that match, Rich, going, I wouldn't mind it's too late, but I wouldn't mind Brody King winning at this tournament to establish, y'all thought it's going to be, Okada and Ospreay and Fletcher in the end, and guess what? You never know. We're establishing this brand it can elevate. This can be kind of the king of the ring in the 90s. This is someone making a statement who wasn't likely to do well in this or win the tournament. Do well, but not win. They could have done that, and I wouldn't mind that. And to me, that'd be a way to establish Brody as a top star, and then you roll with him as one of your top 8, 10 guys.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of Brody's. I think everyone in the House of Black, if they're happy in the company they're in, have opportunities to kind of stand out as single stars. Brody, the most of all, because of his distinct look. And again, going back to the fact that they had a dearth and now they almost have a paucity of super heavyweights. He stands out because you have so many good workers that aren't built like Rhinoceros. And so I like the Ricochet finish, especially with the constant headbutts and the way that Ricochet leaned into it. And he was kind of like, oh, I have this moment. Let me take advantage of it. I thought that was a lot better than Ricochet just like buzzsawing through him. That didn't make sense. And I even like Ricochet's promo in parts, not the hee-hee, Shirani stuff, but talking about selling the size and the ferocity of Brody King as a threat and not just big man go down.
Next from Chris. Mercedes seems like an insane person, but not terrible this week. Anyway, he's got other comments, but we covered a lot of that. I'll jump to JB here. JB from Detroit says, where are these most wanted Bandito vignettes going? We don't know. I hope they actually have a viable character intended for him, as I do believe that he had a lot of untapped potential. Is there a little too much Death Riders on the show right now? I don't know. I mean, it's a talented group. I don't want AEW to downplay their top stars who they're pushing. I just want more developments, more density of relevance to their TV time, so that there's every 2, 3, 4 weeks they're in a different place and things have advanced, as opposed to we had a really good idea that was 2 weeks long and now we're just kind of coasting and we don't know what to do with it. And that's what the Young Bucks having power to book matches was. That, in a way, that's the early few weeks of Moxley was very intense, and now they're just heels beating people up. I mean, to me, it just seems like they get excited and lose focus, and that's what's going on. So I'm fine with them being on TV. I just want there to be real relevance to what they're doing. And I don't even think that's a huge weakness with Death Riders, but it's a chance for me to say, yeah, put them on TV a lot, but just make sure there's a point to it each time that they're on TV. And I don't think it's super weak. What do you think, Rich?
No, I don't either. If anything, the more you have them established as the force that affects everything in AEW, the more likely it is when people do stand up to them, it adds importance to the segments they're in against them. I think about, for instance, Daniel Garcia. He wins the TNT title. Sure, we have the Continental Classic, but there are ways to continue his journey as this new champion, climbing the mountain he saw in front of him. And we're not seeing that. And so I'd rather see this group doing what they're doing with success than wondering where the heck they are in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yep. JB says, should Christian be talking about Moxley's stint in rehab for alcoholism? I understand that they're both currently heels, but I think that paints Moxley in an unnecessarily, I'd say counterproductively, sympathetic light relative to the importance of what he's going for at the moment. Christian is kind of like MJF. OMG, I can't believe he said that. Dead parents, he goes there. But yeah, I mean, it's one of the issues that I have with Shades of Grey is you can start getting really worked up emotionally about something and seem like you're on track to root for against something. And then, for the highbrow Shades of Grey crowd, we got to mix it up and make people now start doubting whether they hate this person or whether they like this person, because Shades of Grey are necessary for us to not be, too simple and playing to simpletons and old school. Yeah, I mean, they're heels. Heels are nasty to each other. I don't know if it's a big deal, but all of a sudden people are like, oh, that's right, Moxley had that issue and he was really brave. And like you're reminding people of something that is not productive to something much more important. I love Christian's work. I mean, the last couple of years, he's been great. But Moxley's story is more important than Christian's right now. And Christian countered what is already an uphill battle to get the crowd to be against Moxley. Rich, what do you think?
I agree. And I like and one of the things I've had as a issue, but you explaining what you just did helped me see it as actually a non-issue, but it might not be intentional. Renee Paquette. There shouldn't be a way in which a heel couldn't push back by the same rule and say, wait a minute, you're talking about my dastardly deeds. You have not said word one about your husband holding the company hostage. But because they've leaned away from their relationship, they haven't had the need to kind of add clarity to that role. Whereas with Moxley and his rehab status, I think that's kind of unnecessary. It's a third rail. Pardon me, I had to take a swig of water. It is, to me, the lowest of the lowest hanging fruit. And it's one of those things, especially with AEW being such a fan-inclusive environment, having someone, even a heel, lean into something that's a very personal struggle for someone like that seems very unnecessary and really just, being an a-hole. It's not even being a heel anymore. It's something where you typically would just be like, I'm turned off to this person.
Mm-hmm. Very good. This is a small thing, but it's been bugging me, and JB brought it up, so let's cover it. It was weird that Excalibur threw to the back, saying that Lio Rush and Action Andretti had something to say, and then immediately panned a Private Party. Rush and Andrade eventually joined the segment, but shouldn't he have said that Private Party had something to say? In kayfabe, how would he have known that Rush and Andrade, Action Andretti, were going to enter the scene? Yes, Excalibur has been doing this a lot, and I'm not blaming him, but I'm not blaming him. I don't know. He might be getting bad notes, but he throws to segments, and it's not the segment he's throwing to. Something happens that is unpredictable because it's live, and he's telling us it's going to happen before it develops. And I mean, if that happens 1 week, it's like, we're professionals. We pay attention to our show. Let's have a production meeting, and let's address this. And it's been happening for weeks. It's gotten really sloppy, Rich.
Yeah. And even with the Private Party deal, you had them, and then you had Top Flight, and then it was supposed to be a celebration, but it was like a sad table in the back. It's like when you went to one of those like Burger King birthday parties and no one showed up, and it's like, oh man, I feel bad for that kid. It's like, here you go, buddy. Like, here's a crown. And again, that goes back to details. And I think, if I could for a second, because this email and then some of the things you and Zach have been discussing over the evening, I look at this stuff, and for those of you who don't know, in addition to doing the stuff at the Torch, I also coach football. I have for almost 20 years, high school, and like volunteered at college level. And one of the oldest adages is the worst thing you could have is a coach stop trying to coach you because they've given up on you. And so with AEW, I enjoy watching it. I enjoy the wrestlers and the storylines that I can get into. The critiques are there for it to be better, not because I hate it. Because especially given time and life, I don't hate watch stuff anymore. If I didn't watch AEW, I would have been like, wait, I can't do Dynamite post show. I got a date with Shrinking, which I will be watching before I go to bed because I do enjoy Shrinking on Apple. It's very good. But Renee, yes, can talk about John. She could talk about her cool relationship with RJ City. But ultimately, all of these things, including Excalibur, are note cards. These aren't things where you have to put it on a board and say, here's why you suck. These are little note cards you slide across and say, next time, do this instead. And I don't think that's a bad thing. You're on mute, Wade.
Thanks. Yes. Rich, good. Well put. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, this has been great. Thank you all for the awesome conversations, both on video, audio, and then as well in the chat. I thought this was a really, since last time I did it a few months ago, it seems like the post show here on YouTube has become a cool spot in terms of you all had some really cool conversations, and it wasn't anyone wilding in the chat, so to speak. And, I look forward to doing this again.
Excellent. Thanks, Rich. Fun having you on. And it's a fun format. And the chat's a big part of it. The video caller and the reactions to the chat while we're talking to people who are on camera, and then the emails. It's a fun format. There's a reason we can go so long. I don't know if we can always go this long. But the time flies by for me, and hopefully for the listeners too. So if you like what we do and you appreciate what we do, show some support for us. Go VIP. You can do so on Spotify. Just go to or search PWTorch VIP if you're a Spotify user, and you can also go to Patreon and search PWTorch VIP and subscribe there. 7-day free trial to our VIP content. When you do that either on Spotify or directly through Patreon, or you can get an overview of full VIP benefits at pwtorch.com/govip. When you get a full VIP membership, it unlocks our nearly 40-year archives of back issues of the Wrestling Torch newsletter, hundreds of retro radio shows from the 1990s, including the ones that I hosted for years on KFN radio with big name guests in a caller format. Great rabbit holes you can just dive into. Our website's been around 25 years, the VIP version of it, about 20, more than 20 actually, and that includes pay-per-view roundtables going back to, I think, late 2003 when we started. So just great stuff in the past, but also new content every day covering the current scene with customizable, easy to activate RSS feeds for Apple Podcasts, the native app, or pretty much any other popular podcast app on Android or iOS. So go VIP, check out full details, pwtorch.com/govip. Thanks everybody. We'll be by Friday night after SmackDown. We might have a Saturday night's main event preview for you tomorrow on the Blue Brand, so look for that, and we'll talk to you all next time.